The D-Class runs through the halls of an empty grocery store with nothing but darkness around him. He turns corner after corner, searching for a door, but there are only endless aisles and stretches of blank walls. Nowhere to go, nowhere to run. Behind him, he can hear a soft, wet, gurgling sound. He turns, eyes wide in horror, and something pulls him down into the floor below, swallowing his screams. The day is drawing to a close, the sun dipping over the horizon as families across the small town wash up after dinner, placing their dirty dishes in the sink and starting to wind down for the evening. For those rare few with office jobs in this town, the workday stopped at 5 p.m., and now there's nothing but rest ahead of them until the day begins fresh again in the morning. But for the employees working the graveyard shift at the local, woefully understaffed grocery store, the day is far from over. There's closing time at 10 p.m., then cleaning, locking up for the night, and eventually, mercifully, clocking out. One of the workers, a young woman, watches the clock through heavy eyes, threatening to close. She shouldn't have picked up this extra shift. Working a double was overly ambitious today, and she can feel exhaustion creeping up on her, threatening to drag her down into an inadvisable on-the-clock slumber. It's almost 8 o'clock, only a few more hours to go. She can make it. Ordinarily, she'd try to make small talk with her coworkers, but several of them called in sick today. It's just her and one cashier, who's been on break for way longer than the allotted 15 minutes. So really, it's just her. She busies herself, shelving jars of peanut butter, watching the seconds tick by. More of the workday gone. More of her so-called summer vacation gone. But every hour worked is more money in the bank, more in the travel fund that will take her out of this town and towards something that might actually make her happy. She just has to save up enough, has to face these monotonous days and the same repeating carousel of faces a little bit longer. Then, it'll all be worth it. She tries not to think about the fact that her older co-workers have said the same thing about themselves, the ones who have worked here for 10 years. They all thought they'd be out of here in a year too, but they aren't. They're still bagging groceries for their neighbors and former classmates, watching the seconds tick by on that grimy old clock. As she reaches down for another jar, someone suddenly speaks just behind her. They ask if they can help her find anything. She spins around, startled, the jar slipping from her grasp and landing on the ground with a crash, glass and peanut butter sprayed across the floor. There's no one there. She must be imagining things, she thinks. But when she turns her back, she hears it again. She spins around, quicker this time, hoping to catch them in the act. There's something so familiar about that voice. Did another coworker come in after all? No, it's not one of her coworkers. Suddenly, as she hears the voice speak again, asking if she wants a paper or plastic bag, her stomach drops. She knows now. The voice is her own. That's it. She's officially too exhausted to keep working right now. There aren't any customers in the store, so she's going to head to the break room and try and get her head together. As she starts the walk there, she suddenly realizes that she can't find the door. The door to the break room is there, but where's the exit? The door she comes through every single day before clocking in. The doors that she practically sprints toward when her shifts close out. The ones that lead to freedom and home and the chance to remember herself as a person and not just an endless stretch of meaningless tasks. Somehow, the door is gone. No, that can't be possible. Doors don't just vanish. She's gotten turned around. She's misplaced it. She paces through the store, determined to find the door, but she can't. It truly seems to have vanished. Sweat begins to bead on her forehead, her hands trembling as she retraces her steps over and over again. It isn't an especially big store. She can't be lost. No, it's just her worst nightmare coming true. She can never go home, can never clock out. She's going to be at work for all eternity. Her mouth dries up. She has trouble swallowing, trouble catching her breath as her breathing becomes shallower, tinged with panic. It's an impossible situation, but she just knows that this is it, that she'll never get to go home again. At the same time, she's never wanted anything more in the world than to get out of here as soon as possible. If she doesn't, she could die in here. And she swore to herself that she would never ever die in this town. As she navigates the aisles, she can hear faint whispering, like people huddled together just out of sight, talking about her in tones just too hushed to make out. A few aisles over, she hears a sudden, piercing scream. Is there someone else trapped in here with her? She follows the sound to aisle 3, but when she peers down the aisle, there's no one there. At least, at first, there's no one there, until she looks down at the floor. There, on the yellowing tiles, a pale, translucent hand is poking up from the floor. The tile around it shimmers and ripples like still water disturbed by a pebble. The hand reaches up, further and further, stretching toward her. It wants her to reach out and grasp it, but the thought turns her stomach. That hand can't belong to anything human. So instead, she turns and runs in the opposite direction, stopping when she can hear the blood rushing in her ears and taste metal on the back of her tongue. As the sound of her pulse fades, her heart slowing, she hears another sound that causes it to spike all over again. A long, slow, dragging sound, like someone pulling something heavy across the floor. It thumps, then drags some more. There's a sound with it, too. A wet, strained sound, like a combination of water bubbling up from a drain and someone struggling to breathe. Every fiber of her being is screaming at her to run, to get out of there right now, but she can't move her feet. The sound draws closer and closer and closer until everything suddenly goes black. If there were anyone passing by the grocery store at the moment, they would hear a scream cut short with a wet gurgle. The next morning, the manager finds her body still lying there in the same aisle. The store closes a few weeks later, never to open again. SCP-3182 is a derelict grocery store in the town of Denton, Missouri that hosts a number of anomalous phenomena during the hour between 7:52 and 8:52 p.m. each day. This window of time is referred to as a Deimos event. Deimos events first began occurring following the store's closure, which is attributed to a combination of an economic downturn and the tragic death of a 17-year-old part-time worker. When a Deimos event occurs, all outside sources of visible light are rendered unable to penetrate the store's interior. Individuals inside during the event will insist that all exits and entrances have disappeared, preventing anyone from leaving or entering. It should be noted that video recordings of SCP-3182 during Deimos events show that the doors do not in fact go anywhere, indicating that SCP-3182 impacts the perceptions and mental states of those affected by it, rather than the environment itself. Some of these aforementioned anomalous effects include a sudden, overwhelming but inexplicable sense of distress or sadness, a sense of severe resentment toward the town of Denton, Missouri, the sudden recollection of memories belonging to former customers of SCP-3182, a sense of approaching danger, and the urge to do something to prevent or escape it, and an extreme desire to leave the area even though it is impossible to do so. These effects primarily occur in the vicinity of aisle 3 of the store. In addition to the emotional and psychological phenomena, there have also been reports of disembodied moaning and screaming, the appearance of humanoid apparitions, and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. In order to obtain a more in-depth understanding of SCP-3182 and its Deimos events, researcher Dr. Gradian supervised a series of on-site tests. D-Class 132449 was selected for the first test, during which he was placed within the former break room of SCP-3182 and instructed to remain there for the full duration of the Deimos event. He was equipped with a camera and earpiece to allow for two-way communication between him and Dr. Gradian. At first, D-132449's attitude was casual, even cheerful, as he expressed relief at having nothing to do but sit in a chair for an hour. But after 7 minutes and 32 seconds passed, he began to feel quite differently. The D-Class became anxious, stating, "I've got to get home soon," before correcting himself to say that he would go back to his cell after the test concluded. 22 minutes and 19 seconds passed, and D-132449 became increasingly uneasy, asking Dr. Gradian if he could hear a strange sound. The noise was not detected on the video feed, but D-132449 insisted that he could hear something, and traced the sound to the broken microwave on a nearby table. In this close proximity, the video feed picked up the sound, a soft gurgling from within the closed microwave. Dr. Gradian recommended that the D-Class not interact with the microwave and that he return to his seat. The man refused, insisting that he had to know what was going on with the microwave. The gurgling sound grew louder and more intense, and Dr. Gradian insisted more strongly that the D-Class not open the microwave. But the man did not listen. He opened the microwave, and the video feed cut to black. The remains of D-132449 were later located throughout the plumbing system of SCP-3182. An inspection of the break room microwave found a viscous black liquid inside, which was extracted and taken to a nearby Foundation site. Analysis of the liquid's makeup concluded that it was genetically identical to several hundred past and current residents of the town of Denton, Missouri. During the next test, D-342089 was instructed to examine Aisle 3 during a Deimos event. First, however, he began in the break room. Before beginning the test, Dr. Gradian gave a strong recommendation that the man avoid pursuing the source of any gurgling sounds he might hear. D-342089 asked why, but Dr. Gradian dodged the question, instead asking the D-Class to move toward Aisle 3. Halfway there, he paused, spotting the words, "Get out of here right now," scratched into the wall over the main entrance. The D-Class remarked that this would be impossible given the lack of doors in SCP-3182. He would not respond to any reminders from Dr. Gradian that there were, in fact, doors in the building, particularly the very entrance door he had walked through to get inside. As D-342089 advanced further into the eerie, darkened store, almost at the infamous Aisle 3, Dr. Gradian checked in regarding his mental state. Aside from the atmosphere, which he deemed pretty damn spooky, D-342089 did not report any adverse mental effects. Before he could elaborate any further on how he was feeling, however, he quickly discovered that he was not alone in the store. A figure, a female humanoid in shape, stood at the other side of Aisle 3. She wore a simple shirt and flared jeans, and if one glanced at her quickly, she might pass for an ordinary girl, but she wasn't. As the D-Class stared at her, he could see her face shifting from ordinary human features to a warped imitation of a face, eyes, nose, and mouth moving out of place and drifting into abnormal configurations. As she raised a hand, he could see that it was a formless, fingerless blob. This was too much for D-342089. The panicked man fumbled around on the shelf next to him, searching for a makeshift weapon. He grabbed a cardboard box and prepared to throw it at the apparition. In response, she shook her head rapidly, warped features frozen in a look of terror. She opened her mouth, and the sound of hundreds of opening cash registers came out. She shook her head even harder, trying to communicate something vital to the D-Class. He refused to listen to the apparition or to Dr. Gradian, who warned him not to do anything rash. But he did do something rash. He threw the box at the entity with all his might, and as it made contact, he could hear a soft gurgling sound just behind him. Then, just as it did before, the video cut out. After the Deimos event concluded, D-342089 was found alive in a dumpster outside SCP-3182. He was, however, missing something: his skin. An investigation of the interior found that the message he had seen written on the wall had completely vanished following the event. During the third test, D-693221 was placed in Aisle 3 and directed to remain there for the duration of the entire Deimos event. Like the other D-Class before her, she was equipped with a camera and an earpiece. As the event began, she reported feeling extremely cold. Dr. Gradian suggested that she remain as calm as possible. She refused, insisting that she needed to leave as soon as possible. When she turned to leave, however, the apparition was standing at the other side of the aisle. Again, she repeated, "I need to get out of here right now. I need to get out of here right now." In response, the apparition nodded in agreement. Dr. Gradian reminded the D-Class that SCP-3182 would not permit her to leave, and she replied, "I need to get out of here right now, or I'll wind up like her." When pressed for further explanation, the terrified D-Class insisted that she didn't understand what she was saying. It was as if the words were being shoved into her mouth, into her mind. She turned to move toward the entrance, and a soft gurgling was suddenly heard. Dr. Gradian warned her to stop moving immediately, and she froze in her tracks. Once she had calmed enough to respond to further instructions, she was ordered to turn and look at the apparition, or rather, as Dr. Gradian referred to it, the ghost. When she met the ghost's eyes, it was shaking its head fervently, eyes wide with fear. The floor beneath it shifted like liquid, the gurgling sound growing louder and louder until human arms burst through the floor, grabbing the ghost and dragging it down out of sight. The ghost gestured frantically toward the exit doors, screaming until it disappeared beneath the floor. The gurgling stopped, The floor was still, and all was quiet for a moment. Then, D693221 was in full panic mode once more, repeating over and over again, "I need to get out of here right now." She repeated this constantly for the remainder of her video footage, running through SCP-3182 frantically, screaming and searching desperately for an exit. Dr. Gradian attempted to direct her, to calm her in some way, but it was as if she could not hear a word he said. She was lost in the dread, lost in the dark. After the Deimos event was through, D693221 was found healthy and unharmed, at least physically. There were no more scheduled tests after this, and she was administered amnestic treatment and returned to the prison population with a reduced sentence. While the woman formerly known as D693221 carried on with her life, the research team reviewed the footage from her test. One researcher analyzed a distinct tattoo visible in one of the spectral arms that reached up from the floor, matching it to that of a man called Colin Mathers. Mathers is the former manager of SCP-3182 and has no reason to be manifesting as a ghostly arm in his abandoned former workplace, given that he is both alive and, as far as anyone can tell, completely ordinary. That is to say, very much not a ghost. Further investigation into the apparition of the girl was conducted, including a series of interviews with past regulars and employees of SCP-3182. Many of those interviewed recounted anomalous activity far before the closing of the store, including an unseen entity that would mimic their voices. This particular detail inspired the research team to conduct one more test. D442099 was sent into SCP-3182, placed in Aisle 3, and instructed to remain there and attempt communication with the entities there via a Foundation-developed EVP detector. It should be noted that the civilian versions of this technology are far less effective. First, D442099 began with a simple, "Hello?" The response recorded by the EVP detector was a mixture of male and female voices, at least 3, saying, "What can I get for you today?" Next, he asked, "Can you understand what I am saying to you?" And the entities responded, "That'll be unintelligible." He followed with, "Can you tell me what you look like?" This seemed to provoke a more emotional response, and the EVP detector picked up around 7 mixed human voices saying, "Look at me. This place has ruined me. I should have moved to Jefferson when I had the chance." "Where are you now?" resulted in over 25 voices saying, "One day I'll have enough money. I'll get out of this place." The response to, "What is your name?" was too garbled to understand, as over 70 voices responded at once. "Please, I don't understand," was met with soft gurgling, which then suddenly cut off. "I don't want to die here," seemed to attract the attention of the lone female ghost, as one solitary female voice replied, "You need to get out of here, right now." "Can I help you?" the D-Class asked. The same female voice replied, sounding strained and frightened, "Please get out of here, right—" Her voice cut off. "Hello," the D-Class called out. There was no response. "Hello," he asked again. The only response was that same soft gurgling. Then he said one more thing. "I don't want to die in this goddamn town." The recorded response was uproarious, cacophonous laughter belonging to a chorus of over 10,000 voices. The sound was nearly deafening. There are undercover Foundation personnel stationed outside of SCP-3182, instructed to prevent any civilians from entering the premises. Civilians who ask follow-up questions are to be given the cover story involving unstable construction. Any past witnesses to a Deimos event must be located and given amnestics dosed in relation to their level of exposure. Because the town of Denton is relatively isolated, any affected individuals should be easy to track down. No Foundation personnel are permitted to enter SCP-3182 during a Deimos event. Any testing conducted during a Deimos event must be approved by at least one Level 3 personnel. However, if any personnel report hearing a soft, gurgling sound while inside the building, they are ordered to vacate immediately. SCP-3182 is a tragic mystery, an abandoned, decaying piece of a town steeped in misery. Like the town itself, it is filled with fear and uncertainty, with a pervasive sense of hopelessness, of no way out during the darkest moments. I have heard from time to time the expression, dead-end job, and I understand it to apply fairly well in this case. Those working at SCP-3182 while it was open seemed to fill the place with so much misery, so much dread and resentment, that something anomalous began to take root. Something, for 1 hour a day, makes those fears real. The people in SCP-3182 believed it to be a dead end, a place where hopes and dreams go to die. And now, it is. July 18th, 2014. The calm and peaceful tranquility of the day has just been disrupted by the squawk of a panicked report over the radio. Civilians in danger. Urgent assistance required. The park ranger hears the screams carried through the trees by the wind a second later, already hurtling his way toward the location given by his colleague. Something is very, very wrong. Usually nothing like this happens at Crater Lake National Park. His mind starts racing as fast as the Jeep he's driving, a brain entering survival mode, trying to predict every possible danger. A forest fire? It was still daylight. He'd have seen the smoke. An animal attack? Maybe. Bears could sometimes be seen roaming about on the fringes of the park, but they typically kept away from humans, especially the more people were around. And today, in the midst of July, there were plenty to ward off any strays. Every attempted prediction only raised the same question. Just what the hell was going on? Approaching the tree line, one of the other rangers waves down the car. She's armed. If the vagueness of the report hadn't been troubling enough, seeing another park ranger with a shotgun in her hands certainly was. They were in bear territory. It wasn't unheard of for one of them to occasionally need a gun to ward the bears off, but that was a rarity out at Crater Lake. Slamming the brakes and leaping out of the Jeep, the park ranger rushes towards his colleague as she takes cover behind a nearby tree. He immediately asks her what the situation is, but she urges him to be quiet. There's something out there with them, she tells him in a whisper, racking a live round into her shotgun. When the park ranger asks what, the other ranger shoots him a look. Her eyes say it all. She's terrified and confused. This isn't just a wild animal on a rampage or frightenedly defending its territory and cubs. She has no idea what it is. She can't even believe she's seen it, let alone start describing it. Twigs snap under the foot of something, causing the other ranger to raise her shotgun, leaning out from behind the tree in the direction of the noise. She scans the space a few feet beyond the barrel. Nothing. The park ranger takes a look for himself, not exactly eager to see what it is, but unable to fend off his own curiosity. He spots something, nothing more than a shape passing between the trees, almost mistaking it for a branch simply moving in the gentle breeze. He taps on the other ranger's shoulder and alerts her. Whatever it is, it's close, and it seems to be walking like a man. The other ranger looks. In a second, she raises her shotgun and fires. A blast of buckshot erupts from the barrel, causing a deafening, high-pitched ringing in the park ranger's ears. He doubles over, clutching his ears as the sound becomes physically painful, not realizing his colleague fumbling as she grabs a fresh cartridge, or the thing staggering towards them. That is, until he looks up, the moment his hearing returns. It's like part of the forest has come to life and assumed the shape of a human being in order to attack them. Roots cover its body, sealing up the space where its eyes would be. Oregon-beaked moss coats its arms and hangs off it like it's been draped in a sheet of yellowy-green plants. The creature is horrible to look at, and yet it looks lost. It stumbles, arms outstretched like it's trying to blindly feel its way around, and the park ranger realizes it can't see. Another cartridge clicks into the shotgun tube, pulled back the chamber by the slide of the pump, and the other ranger raises the weapon, steadying her aim so as not to miss this time. Her sights line up, the mossy monstrosity sitting in the center, and her fingers squeezes on the trigger. An unexpected force from below pushes the barrel of the shotgun upwards, pointing it towards the treetops. Another ear-splitting blast rings out, sending nearby birds flying from their nests in panic. The park ranger keeps the weapon pointed up, despite his colleague's protests to let go of her gun, or the drops of blood dripping out and trailing down his neck from his own eardrums. He glances over his shoulder as, whatever it is, flees in terror. Startled by the shotgun blast, it runs away between the trees, knocking into some as it moves with uncertainty. Minutes later, a team of other rangers arrives, declaring that they're taking over the search effort for the creature that was found lurking around Crater Lake National Park. These rangers seem off. They look the part, in full uniforms and everything, but the park ranger can't place their faces. They somehow seem brand new, yet not one of them is fazed by the unusual situation. They seemed all the more interested in questioning all the hikers and families visiting the park who had seen the creature, as they were in actually finding it. It was almost as if they didn't want the word getting out. The park ranger decides he can't keep quiet any longer and raises a concern to the newcomers. He tells them that he doesn't think whatever is out there is some kind of monster. He thinks it's human. The new rangers thank him for his input, but insist that they'll take it from here. Little did he know, these weren't other park rangers. They were agents of the SCP Foundation. They have been embedded within the National Parks Rangers to contain SCP-3310, an anomalous log floating in Crater Lake, said to contain a powerful deity named Yao, who can cause dangerous weather to erupt unless the log is left to float freely. Then the call comes in from SCP Foundation Command, reports of an entity attacking civilians. Since they happen to be nearby, in the same park no less, a handful of agents are sent in to investigate and, if possible, contain the creature. Before too long, the civilian witnesses, even the real park rangers who had tried to kill the entity, have all been interviewed, administered with memory-wiping amnestics, and subsequently released, as if nothing out of the ordinary has even happened. Putting boots to the ground, the search for the unidentified creature doesn't last long. Within 2 hours, the agents have found what they're looking for. Only, it's not a creature. It's a person. His name is Zach Herman. They find him cowering under an alcove near the edge of the lake, his moss-covered skin providing a near-perfect camouflage for him to blend in with his woodland surroundings. The only thing that gives him away is the sound of his frightened sobs. The Foundation agents aren't under orders to neutralize him on sight. Instead, they humanely subdue Zach Herman and arrange to have him taken to a nearby Foundation outpost for examination. SCP-3462, an anomalous humanoid entity known to inhabit a rundown Blockbuster video rental store in the nearby town of Bend, Oregon, with the area having been sealed off and constantly patrolled by Foundation personnel. So that seems like the best place to take Zach and figure out exactly what happened to him. Upon closer examination at the Foundation outpost, it's discovered that Zach Herman has a number of unidentified roots growing through both his skin and internal organs. Given the danger to his life that this poses, he's rushed into an operating theater to undergo emergency surgery. 18 hours pass as the Foundation tries to save the man's life. At this time, the surgeons decide that it isn't wise or possible to remove all the roots at once, so instead, they focus on clearing the ones that had grown within and over his eyes, nostrils, ear canals, and throat. Another 7 hours of intensive surgery pass, and Zach Herman is still alive. He's not cured, but the roots covering much of his face have at least been cleared. After stabilizing, it's then that he's transferred to Site 56, where the Foundation intends to conduct further operations to remove the growths from his body, as well as ask Zach questions about what happened to him. They're still baffled as to what caused his anomalous mutation into a moss monster. Just where had these roots come from? And what exactly was SCP-7185? Researcher Charlie Canley is tasked with conducting interviews with the subject, Zach Herman, between his various procedures, and she wastes no time in unearthing his story. Oak Ridge, Oregon, 60 miles north of Crater Lake National Park, where Zach will eventually be found. That's where he describes the horrific mutation taking place. Given that the roots would grow over his eyes, his vision impaired, he has no idea where he's going until he eventually winds up in Crater Lake. Scared, alone, and changed beyond recognition. And as he describes it, he wasn't the only one. Shortly before his own mutation, Zach mentions witnessing the same happening to Kellen Herman, his husband. The couple, along with a group of several others, are in a small Oregon town reached by traveling to Hills Creek Lake, then following Hills Creek Road south until finding a road sign simply labeled Beard. The place has spent 70 years in ruins, abandoned, and left to be overtaken by the elements. Most of the roads leading into the area are blocked off thanks to a landslide, leaving the town completely void of all human life. Until Zach and his friends arrive in Beard. There are 6 of them in total, including Zach, his husband Kellen, then Azrael, Mark, Angel, and Caleb. Answering an ad on Craigslist, the group has come to Beard after being hired by a man named Sean to scavenge through the abandoned town, collecting anything that could potentially be of value. Scrap metal and intact valuables, as long as they can be resold, are worth holding on to. While the group searches, Sean delivers food and supplies to them once per month. One thing that they hope for each time, but never seem to get, is something to drink in their downtime. So on a whim, while exploring an abandoned factory they come across, Zach looks for an alternative source of beer for the group to enjoy. What he finds is an unusual blue machine. Pulling levers on it, he finds that it dispenses samples of a surprisingly green liquid. Of course, none of the group immediately drinks it. Not until Angel finds an old journal with entries dating back to the 1930s. It describes the owners of the factory giving the liquid to their workers and only ceasing the practice after the workers stopped getting drunk. Taking that to mean the liquid was safe to drink, the group decided to each take a swig of the green. Initially, none of them feel any change. It's actually rather anticlimactic, at least at first. Soon after, however, they start to feel energized, more alert, and awake for much longer without feeling the usually expected fatigue that would bring. It even helps them search through parts of the town quicker, something they're all grateful for. After a week, not one of them even feels the need to sleep. They were even healing from injuries faster, small cuts were sealing in minutes, bruises clearing entirely almost as quickly as they formed. After about a month, the negative side effects start. They start manifesting as small symptoms, the group experiencing various bodily aches that gradually become far, far worse. It affects each of them differently too. Zach starts to experience a tightness in his chest, while Caleb develops a bad fever that leaves him barely able to function. Mark and Angel's hair starts falling out in thick clumps too. Soon after, the same is happening to Caleb. His symptoms are the first to worsen. After his hair falls out, his skin starts to do the same. It keeps peeling away, turning red. Then, Sean arrives in Beard. According to the information given by Zach in his interviews with the Foundation, their employer would routinely drive to the town every 3 months in order to pick up anything valuable the group has recovered. All of them suffering from the ill effects of whatever the liquid they'd all drank was. Those of the group that still had the strength to stand rushed to meet Sean and beg him to get them help. Upon taking one look at them, he drives away, abandoning them. 4 days after Sean left them there, the sleepless group is startled by screaming in the night. It's Caleb, and he's on fire. Panicking, the others try to help, pouring water on him to douse the flames. It seems to work, but it's only a few minutes before the fire starts up again. They even try taking him to the creek that runs through the town, but submerging Caleb in the water only causes his skin to form massive blisters that painfully burst. Keeping him under didn't work either. He kept needing to come up for air, and breaking the surface, he started catching fire again the second he was above water. There was nothing they could do to save him. He just kept burning. Caleb is the first of the group to die. It's not clear when this occurred. Investigating the area, the Foundation recovers fragmented journal entries written by Azrael, in which the others all attribute Caleb's death to him having a weak immune system. But normally, diseases don't cause people to spontaneously catch fire. By the morning, he is almost completely burned, leaving only a charred corpse that the group buries by the factory. Following Caleb's death, Zach is forced to leave. The others blame him for Caleb's death, and he does as well. He intends to find some other way of getting help for the rest of the group. Kellen joins him, and the couple leave Beard together. Meanwhile, Angel, Mark, and Azrael search for their own way out of the town, but to no avail. Hardly any of the roads are accessible on foot, and those that are just lead to abandoned properties on the woodland outskirts of Beard. According to Azrael's journal entry, they then refocused their efforts towards finding a cure for whatever it was they had drunk. It's not much more successful. During Zach and Kellen's absence, Mark is the next group member whose symptoms start to get worse. His hair was almost entirely gone, and soon, rashes started to form over his skin before peeling away. Immediately, he and the other two start to fear that what happened to Caleb might be about to happen to Mark too. Their only plan is for Mark to stay out in the snow if he starts catching fire in the same way, since, by this point, winter had reached Oregon. But instead of a reoccurrence of Caleb's condition, Mark's skin begins repeatedly forming an unusual bluish-green substance, warm to the touch. It accumulates every few hours, and Angel and Azrael help him scrape it off before it ultimately returns. Within days, it's returning faster, too fast for them to clear it. So much of it forms that it starts dripping off Mark. Then Angel points out it seems to be candle wax, and the more of it, the hotter it gets. Shortly after, the substance burns out Mark's eyes. He's completely covered in scalding hot wax, with no way of removing it entirely. Eventually, he dies. Angel and Azrael can't move his body thanks to the wax, as more of it keeps forming, nor can they bury him yet thanks to a snowstorm outside. It's only a week later that Azrael thinks he sees the body moving. Mark is still alive. He's been lying in a pile of hot wax the entire time, his body still making more. Soon, he stops moving altogether. While all this is happening, Kellen and Zach are still trying to find help, but manage to wind up lost in the woods surrounding Beard. The numerous overlapping and confusing paths surrounding the town had meant one wrong turn sends both of them heading towards the woods, with only a few cans of food, a lighter, and a pocket knife between them. After a week, they pass a mountain that Zach assumes is the Diamond Peak volcano. Another week later, both he and Kellen are beginning to suffer their own severe symptoms from the liquid they consumed. Kellen is vomiting shards of metal and glass. Further metallic chunks were breaking through Kellen's skin as they grew within his body. At the same time, roots grow over Zach's eyes, preventing him from fully seeing just what is happening to his husband. They sit together in Kellen's dying moments, Zach feeling like he needs to be there for his partner, even though he can't see him or do anything to help him. A few hours after Kellen's breathing eventually stops, Zach walks through the woods until he hears the sound of cars, only to be found in Crater Lake National Park. Around the same time, Angel also dies. It takes him a whole week after his eyelids and fingernails fall out, followed by every layer of his skin. It would happen multiple times, thanks to the effects of the green liquid causing him to recover. Also, his skin could once again come off. At one point, Azrael, horrified by it all, sees his friend's face fall off. Still unable to find a way out of Beard, one of the remaining two survivors of the group also starts to change. Bumps form under Azrael's skin, eventually causing his hands to become swollen and preventing him from moving anything below his chest. Aware of his impending fate, he stashes the journal he's been writing in inside a backpack and leaves it for whoever finds them. The Foundation is able to recover the bodies of Azrael, Angel, Mark, and the buried remains of Caleb within Beard, but they decline to share this information with Zach. Sean's identity is confirmed to be that of Sean McDougal, and Foundation agents are sent to interrogate him. They aren't able to ascertain any valuable information from him, so instead amnesticize him. Anything saved on Sean's devices relating to the location of the town of Beard, the group he hired to scavenge there, and the $46,000 he'd made from the scavenged goods are all seized. SCP-7185 consists of two elements. The first is an unidentified machine that was uncovered by Zach Herman and his friends in an abandoned factory in the southern Cascadian mountain range of Oregon. Despite not having any power sources connected to it, SCP-7185 seemingly functions without the need for electricity. It is instead operated via a series of levers connected to the main body of the device. Two are black and one is rusted over. Should both of the black levers be switched downwards and the rusty lever pulled, the machine will produce the second element of this anomaly, designated by the Foundation as SCP-7185-1, hereby alternatively known as the body horror juice. The alcoholic liquid byproduct of activating SCP-7185 is green in color and has a semi-viscous consistency. If this liquid is drunk at any point by a human being, then this person will undergo major bodily changes that tend to span a period of at least several weeks. Anyone ingesting SCP-7185-1 will suffer numerous mutations and deformations of their body, although exactly how they are altered varies depending on the person drinking the juice. SCP-7185-1 also negates the effects of any depressants, opiates, or other stimulants taken after ingestion, meaning there is no way to nullify the pain of these intense physical changes. On July 21, 2014, Zach Herman died due to complications during surgery. The Foundation surgeons had been making extensive efforts to clear the roots growing throughout his body as a result of Herman ingesting SCP-7185. They had made enough of a difference to allow him to participate in interviews with researcher Canley. However, during these exchanges, Zach mentions that he can still feel everything that is happening to him during the procedures. Every incision, every removal, every stitch. The same day, the body of Zach's husband, Kellen Herman, is also recovered.
The morning sun streamed through the window,
casting beams of light that pierced the dusty, cluttered apartment. Remnants of a life filled with promise were bathed in the soft, ethereal glow. Faded photographs of various dig sites framed articles highlighting his amazing finds with headlines such as "Whiz Kid Archaeologist Unearths Lost Tomb. Archaeology's Rising Star Makes History Again." It was an archaeological record of an archaeologist's life. Now, he himself was an artifact, buried in the past. Years had passed since the glowing headlines. Now, the only stories written about him bore harsh titles like "From Prodigy to Pariah" or "Disgraced Digger's Downfall." A knock on the door caused the man to jolt up from the tattered sofa that doubled as his bed. He looked around the room in a panic. Another louder, more insistent knock soon followed.
"Open the door,"
said a thick Austrian accent. The man tiptoed, his breath catching with every step. Carefully, he looked through the peephole. In the hall stood a short, bald man, flanked by two burly men in dark suits.
"I can see your eyeball, yeah?"
He ducked down immediately, heart pounding. Who were they? Could this be a scheme by the landlord to scare him over unpaid bills? Rent wasn't due yet. Was it? What day was it, anyway?
"You are the archaeologist who had the unfortunate, incident with the pharaoh's tomb, yeah?"
The man rested his head against the door, his face etched with dread. Another journalist, hoping to extract one more humiliating quote. When would it end? Why couldn't they just leave him alone?
"I want to offer you a job."
The man's eyes blinked wide open as he slowly raised his head. This must be some kind of joke. Yes, that must be it. This was all a cruel joke.
"You were the best archaeologist in the world, and I only work with the best,"
the little Austrian stated confidently.
"Could you please open the door?"
The little Austrian man waited, silent and patient. His two suited guards exchanged glances. Finally, the door clicked open. The bald man strolled in, followed by his muscle. They swept laundry off a chair, presenting it like a throne for their boss. The little Austrian gestured for him to sit. Nervously, the man licked his palms, smoothing down his hair as though to make a good impression, though that opportunity had long gone. Cautiously, he sat opposite his guest. The Austrian leaned forward, a spark of excitement dancing in his eyes. With a snap of the little Austrian's fingers, one of the hulking guards produced a briefcase and whipped it open to reveal a stone tablet. "What can you tell me about this?" the little Austrian inquired, passing the artifact to the man, whose eyes had lit up. He hadn't felt this alive in years. As the man examined the tablet, he explained that the carvings etched in the stone resembled 3,000-year-old petroglyphs that were found in the Boca Negra Canyon region of New Mexico. He feverishly pulled a topographical map from his bookshelves. As the man traced his finger over the modern map, his eyes darted to ancient lines of the tablet. "See this squiggly line? That signifies mountains, and this symbol here might indicate water. Based on this, whatever you're searching for is likely buried here," he concluded, jabbing a finger at a valley in New Mexico. The little Austrian man smiled smugly. "Good. You will go to New Mexico for me, yeah?" The man eagerly nodded. "Boris will accompany you," the Austrian stated. Boris, the human wall, stared silently. "He will ensure you don't go pee-pee on my treasure," the little Austrian added with a chuckle. Within hours, the archaeologist found himself on a jet to New Mexico with Boris. Upon arrival, a fully equipped crew awaited them, already camped at the coordinates he'd provided. Their unsettling efficiency hinted at the stakes. The team soon unearthed a tomb entrance blocked by a massive stone slab. But this was no ordinary barrier. The stone bore an eerie fresco of a human figure, covered in white spots, as if warning of danger, or even a curse. The man felt an immediate pull, eager to decode the fresco's ominous warning, but he had only a moment to speculate before Boris, the lumbering oaf, began rigging the ancient stone with dynamite. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" the archaeologist protested. Boris ignored the man's outcries and struck a match. As the fuse burned, everyone ran for cover. They barely had enough time to brace themselves before a giant blast tore the ancient entrance apart. The archaeologist could only stare in shock as shards of history fell from the sky, raining down around him. The smoke barely cleared before Boris charged into the darkness of the tomb. The crew shared a few hesitant glances before following inside. They were here to explore. They were paid to explore, and that's exactly what they would do. They made their way down a narrow corridor, their footsteps echoing eerily through the tomb. Soon, they entered a vast cavern, flashlight beams skimming across the walls. Every inch was covered in ancient markings, human figures speckled with those same white dots.
Must be a disease of some sort, something that affects the skin,
the man mumbled, hoping Boris would hear him. Despite the warning, Boris pressed forward, unfazed, and the crew reluctantly followed. As the procession neared the center of the cavern, a crew member at the back stumbled. The stone beneath his foot sank into the floor with a low, grinding sound.
"Watch your step,"
the archaeologist whispered, his voice barely cutting through the heavy silence. Suddenly, a whooshing sound was heard, then another and another. A blood-curdling scream broke the silence. The archaeologist swung around with his flashlight, just in time to watch an axe violently swing past him, inches away from his face. Another axe swung behind him, grazing his arm. The archaeologist was in shock, frozen to the spot. Two large hands gripped his legs, pulling him down to the ground. It was Boris. As they lay on the ground, the deadly axes swung through the air. They watched as several of their crew members were cut down. "Get down!" the archaeologist shouted. It was too late. One of the crew was impaled by an axe. His torso split in two while he was still standing. It took a moment for his legs to give way, causing his body to crumple to the ground. Blood burst from the wound in a grotesque fountain, spilling and pooling around the severed remains. At last, after the chaos and bloodshed, it was over. Silence descended on the cavern. The remaining crew lay huddled on the floor, too shaken to move. Boris was the first to rise. He casually dusted off his suit and started heading deeper into the cavern. As the archaeologist looked at the carnage of his fallen teammates that littered the floor of the cavern, something snapped inside him.
"We can't leave them here,"
the man said defiantly. Boris stared at him with a calculating coldness, sharp enough to break stone. His hand slid into his suit, reaching for something, but the archaeologist, too fired up to notice, was oblivious.
"Did you hear me? I said we're not going any further until we—"
The gunshot was deafening. The crew member standing a few feet behind the man dropped to the ground. Boris had shot him in the face.
"What were you saying?"
Boris asked flatly. The archaeologist stared back in shock and horror. What had he gotten himself into? Boris placed his weapon back in his pocket. That's when the archaeologist saw it, a white lesion on his hand. Before he could even open his mouth, Boris cut him off.
"We keep moving,"
he growled and continued walking deeper into the cavern. The reluctant crew followed Boris as, unbeknownst to them, danger lurked beneath their feet again.
"Everyone move slowly and—"
the archaeologist warned, but it's too late. The plates clicked beneath the crew members' feet, and the walls came alive. A torrent of arrows exploded from the walls, each one finding its mark with lethal precision. The crew member screamed in agony as the arrows skewered him. Blood bubbled from his chest and neck. That's when the archaeologist saw it again, another white lesion on the dead man's cheek, another on his arm. Dread washed over him. He looked down at the open palms of his hands and flipped them over. And there, just at the edge of his wrist, a small white lesion stared back at him. He lifted his sleeves, more lesions, his pant legs, even more.
"Everyone check themselves,"
the archaeologist shouted. The crew quickly complied, and to their horror, every one of them was infected with the strange disease. It had barely been 2 hours since their exposure. The infection spread fast. With eyes filled with terror, everyone was looking at their bodies and each other when Boris fired his weapon into the air. He stared at them blankly, without an ounce of remorse or fear.
"Keep moving,"
he barked. No one could decide which fate was worse, the anomalous infection spreading rapidly through their bodies, or Boris and his trigger-happy fingers. With a collective sigh, everyone dropped their heads and followed Boris. As they were about to enter the third cavern, Boris stopped. He grabbed an unwitting crew member and shoved him to the front.
"You lead the way,"
he ordered the terrified young man. The young man looked back at the archaeologist, his face contorted with terror.
Just go slow and test every step,
the archaeologist offered reassuringly. The young man nodded, but remained unconvinced. Cautiously, he began testing each step as he made his way through the cavern. The others followed closely behind, stepping only where he had. The going was slow and cautious, but they were still alive. That is, until the young man tested a step that made the floor shift beneath him. He froze, then tried stepping in another direction, but the ground gave way, opening into a gaping chasm beneath his feet. His screams reverberated off the cave walls as he plummeted into a pit of spikes, landing with a sickening crunch. The crew carefully stepped around the chasm and looked down at the horror below. The young man's body was jerking violently against the large spikes. The archaeologist grabbed Boris's arm.
We can't keep losing men like this.
Boris looked down at the archaeologist's hand, then back to his eyes. The archaeologist dryly swallowed and released his grip.
We leave after we find the treasure. Those are my orders. And yours.
Boris stated dryly, patting the outline of his gun through his suit jacket. With a collective grunt of surrender, the crew followed Boris further into the tomb.
My white spots are gone,
one crew member exclaimed suddenly. Everyone started to check themselves, and sure enough, by some strange miracle, everyone's lesions had vanished from their skin. But their joy was short-lived. A deep ache started to spread through their bodies. Every movement felt like their muscles were being set on fire. Crew members dropped to the ground, writhing in pain.
Leave them,
Boris grunted. Even he was having trouble keeping up his usual pace. What was happening to them? Were they dying? Maybe it was just dehydration after 24 hours without any water. Upon entering the vast chamber, everyone sighed in relief. They had made it. Before them lay gold and rubies, scattered among mounds of white cloth that seemed to have the shape of mummies? The crew had entered into the fourth and final cavern, a mass burial chamber. While the crew used their achy limbs to stuff their pockets with trinkets, the archaeologist looked around for Boris. He was in the center of the room, heading for a wooden box.
Let him have it,
muttered the archaeologist as he surveyed the burial chamber. His eyes landed on the walls, covered in primitive symbols depicting a story. The images depicted a meteorite crashing to Earth and entire groups of humans succumbing to the disease it carried. The pictographs showed humans with white spots covering their bodies, the spots fading, followed by drawings of people writhing in agony. Then, it looked like they were tearing their own flesh apart. The archaeologist gasped in alarm. His gaze shifted to another pictograph, one that unmistakably warned against removing the wooden box from its resting place.
Boris, no!
The archaeologist shouted. Boris had already lifted the box and opened it. With a look of dismay, he pulled out a small black rock. It was unlike any stone he'd ever seen. The entire cavern began to shudder violently. Debris and dust cascaded from above as a massive boulder dislodged, plummeting straight for Boris.
Look out!
The archaeologist shouted. Boris looked up, but it was too late. The boulder crashed down, crushing Boris. The black rock tumbled to the shaking ground beside the archaeologist. With the cave collapsing around him, the archaeologist was forced into action. He wasn't going to die there. He snatched the rock and bolted out of the cavern, his aching muscles screaming in protest.
Move, move, move!
He shouted over the roar of the collapsing cave. The remaining crew ran for the doorway as large rocks smashed down, catching those too slow to evade them.
We're almost there!
He shouted to the surviving crew. As they neared the narrowing cave entrance, the walls began to grind, shifting to seal off the cave forever. With a final, heart-stopping surge, the archaeologist and crew threw themselves forward. The entrance slammed shut with a deafening thud, just seconds after they escaped. The survivors collapsed to the ground, coughing out the dust-filled air.
We made it,
the archaeologist whimpered, clutching the black rock tightly. The journey back was slow, each step heavier than the last. Their bodies ached, and something worse felt like it was taking hold. The sun had just begun to dip behind the horizon when they finally reached camp. The archaeologist staggered toward the tents, his hands trembling as he held onto the black rock. The others followed, their faces pale, their skin hanging loosely in places. Their movements were sluggish, their bodies racked with pain. The crew members who had stayed behind to tend to their equipment were the first to notice the change. Their eyes widened in shock as they looked at their returning comrades.
We're infected,
the archaeologist whispered under his breath. Even though no one dared to speak the words aloud, he could see the panic in their eyes already. Without a word, the survivors were ushered into the tents. The archaeologist sank to the ground, his head pounding, his body trembling as he leaned against the nearest tent pole. The air was thick with groans, the sounds of bodies twisting in pain. As the sun set over the camp, the agonized cries of the infected filled the night sky. The remaining crew sat around the campfire, faces grim as they picked at their food, appetite long gone. "I'll go check on them," one of the crew members volunteered after a long silence. She stood up and walked toward the nearest tent. The others stared straight ahead, eyes vacant, lost in thought. Then a voice broke the stillness. "What's that on your forehead?" One of the crew members froze as he stared at his friend. A white lesion was on his skin. As he reached up to touch it, his own gaze fell upon a similar lesion on the arm of the person next to him. One by one, the others checked themselves, and the horror spread like wildfire. Their bodies were now riddled with white lesions. Panic coursed through them. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream rang out. The crew members jumped to their feet, their hearts racing. They rushed to their tents, fear clawing at their throats. She stumbled out, her face pale and filled with terror. They looked inside. The archaeologist was inside, his body bent over, his hands clawing at his own skin. He was peeling away the flesh of his arm with a sickening, compulsive motion. The crew stood frozen in horror, unable to look away. Another scream tore through the night from one of the tents. Rushing over, they found more of their team, the ones who had escaped the caves, engaged in the same grotesque act, clawing at their own flesh. Some used their hands, others knives, and a few even wielded crude, blunt objects. "We need to get help," one crew member murmured, but they all knew it was futile. Without another word, the newly infected crew piled into a jeep. They needed to get to town, but they had to avoid causing panic. They couldn't let anyone know what had happened to them. Not yet. The jeep idled by the sidewalk as the crew member walked up to the house. Inside, the others watched with bated breath. They'd chosen the one person without visible lesions to make the approach. As he shuffled toward the door, his eyes darted back to the jeep, scanning for any danger. But the crew inside had shifted their attention to a small child they'd spotted nearby, playing in the garden. The little boy, with dirt-streaked cheeks and a curious glint in his eyes, was pushing a toy truck across the grass. At first, the crew thought nothing of it, but then, as the boy paused and looked up, he started walking toward the jeep. His small, bare feet shuffled closer and closer, his gaze never leaving the vehicle. The crew member closest to the window stiffened, his eyes locking with the boy's. "Did he just notice us?" one of them whispered, voice tight with unease. The others peered through the windows, holding their breath. The boy stopped directly in front of the jeep, tilted his head slightly, and stared at them with wide, innocent eyes. "Why do you guys look like leopards?" the boy innocently asked. The crew exchanged panicked glances. "Go away!" one of the crew said through the closed car window. She was scared the little boy would get infected. The boy shrugged and turned away from the jeep. He wandered back toward the house, unconcerned, his toy truck still clutched in his hand. As the crew member hung up the phone, the little boy tugged at his mom's dress. "Mom, why do those people outside look like leopards?" he asked. The couple rushed outside. Their expressions shifted to disgust as they spotted the crew in the jeep. But before they could react, the crew member who'd knocked darted back into the vehicle and they sped away. It didn't take long for the CDC to arrive at the camp, their convoy of vehicles kicking up dust as they rolled in. A team of experts in hazmat suits began examining the white lesions that now covered the Stage 1 patients. The lesions were striking, unnervingly uniform, an anomaly that suggested something unnatural at work. At first, the CDC specialists were cautious but hopeful. They suspected it could be Staphylococcus epidermidis, a relatively benign bacteria that can cause skin infections under certain conditions. It would explain the appearance of the lesions and the rapid onset of symptoms. But as the team moved deeper into the camp, to where the Stage 3 patients were housed, their hopes quickly evaporated. These patients were no longer simply sick. They were possessed. Some lay on the floor, clawing at their own skin like feral animals. Others stood, their hands and faces a grotesque mess of open wounds. A few tore at their flesh in jagged, frantic motions, driven by an unrelenting urge to destroy themselves. The sight was so horrific that even the hardened CDC officials recoiled. "This isn't staph," the lead specialist muttered under his breath. "This is something far more..." Before he could finish his thought, a scream shattered the air. In a blink, one of the Stage 3 patients lunged at him, the rage in their eyes unmistakable. Without warning, the rest followed. The infected tore at the hazmat suits, ripping through the material with alarming strength. Gloves were torn off, helmets yanked from their heads, leaving the CDC officials exposed and vulnerable. The CDC official had been right. This wasn't a simple pathogen. This was SCP-1121. SCP-1121 is an unknown amoeboid protozoa with a unique mutagenic ability that only activates when exposed to Staphylococcus epidermidis, a usually harmless bacterium found on human skin. When introduced to other organisms, SCP-1121 remains dormant. Its DNA shares genes with several insect species, but also contains genes not found in any known organisms. SCP-1121 does not reproduce naturally and does not require liquid to survive. Once SCP-1121 interacts with S. epidermidis, it mutates the bacteria into SCP-1121-1, a highly dangerous strain, before dying. This marks the beginning of the infection, which affects 100% of those exposed, even though S. epidermidis is normally harmless to healthy humans. SCP-1121-1 is resistant to all known antibiotics, and as of now, no cure exists for infections caused by Staphylococcus epidermidis excitiabilis. Infected subjects undergo a series of stages. Stage 1. Within 2 to 5 hours of infection, small white lesions appear on the skin, indistinguishable from a typical S. epidermidis infection, making misdiagnosis likely. Stage 2. About 24 hours after Stage 1, the lesions fade as the infection spreads deeper into the skin. SCP-1121-1 consumes the subcutaneous tissue, turning it into a viscous substance, causing excruciating pain. The skin becomes pale and slouches, resembling extreme weight loss. Stage 3. Patients begin to remove their skin, often using their hands, though some use tools. This process appears painless due to Stage 2 and is not a conscious action. When the underlying substance is exposed, victims become disoriented and hostile to the uninfected, making termination necessary before reaching this stage. SCP-1121-1 spreads quickly during stages 1 and 2, primarily through skin contact, but evidence suggests it can spread without direct contact. Hazmat suits are mandatory when handling any samples. Even after Stage 3, the infection persists in removed skin, with the bacteria remaining active for an unknown period. The danger posed by discarded skin remains an unresolved threat. According to Addendum 1121-A-01, SCP-1121 was unearthed during an archaeological dig in New Mexico. The archaeologist who first came into contact with the meteorite is now considered SCP-1121-1, Patient 0. Within 2 days, the infection spread from Patient 0 to the entire research team and several local residents. Although initial containment was handled by the CDC, the Foundation was contacted for assistance. The meteorite and Patient 0 were transferred to Biological Research Site 13, and a 10-kilometer radius around the dig site was cleared using Mark 77 bombs. The only known colonies of SCP-1121 were recovered from the meteorite. Mass spectrometer analysis, utilizing rubidium-strontium dating, determined the meteorite's age to be approximately 2.5 billion years. Further details on the exact circumstances surrounding the meteorite's arrival and Patient Zero's actions have been redacted. The mobile task agent weeps in terror as the nightmarish cartoon figures surround him in the middle of the bright pink, whimsical town pulled out of your childhood fever dreams. Deformed childhood beasts drink greedily from a fountain overflowing with blood. But the agent doesn't fear them. He fears Mr. Hister, the huge looming figure in the yellow cloak, brimming with tendrils, and that awful face beneath the hood, smiling its rotting smile. All around them, children stand trance-like for the ceremony, ready to receive their final judgment, as up above, a door made of mirror floats, surrounded by the suspended floating bodies of the people who weren't so lucky. Mr. Hister leans in. He's got a question to ask, and if the MTF agent can't answer it, something horrible beyond imagination is going to happen to him. That's just how it is when you're dealing with SCP-5853. SCP-5853 refers to a line of packaged Taffy candies. Each package contains 2 candies, one blue with a raspberry flavor and one red with a cherry flavor. The blue candy appears to have no anomalous effects or adverse effects at all, aside from getting stuck in one's teeth. However, the red candy is a different story. Anyone who consumes the red candy and recites a key phrase will be teleported to an extra-dimensional shape, seemingly identical to the location of Ticky Taffy Town, a 90s-era television show that advertised the candy and has been designated SCP-5853-A. It was the UIU, a branch of the FBI specialized in investigating paranormal occurrences, who first identified the anomaly after they noticed a correlation between the airing of SCP-5853-A episodes and the disappearances of children. The show and its corresponding candy have been linked to approximately 3,500 child disappearances between the years of 1994 and 1999. As the UIU looked into unexplained disappearances during these years, a peculiar pattern began to emerge among several cases. The missing child was most recently seen in or entering a kitchen pantry. The only evidence left behind was a pile of open Ticky Taffy wrappers, specifically the blue raspberry variety. Shortly before their disappearance, the child was watching an episode of the show featuring the character Mr. Hister, and the missing child's parent could hear the show's theme music just before the child vanished. After a UIU operative's child joined the list of missing kids, the case was turned over to the SCP Foundation, along with all of the UIU's findings up to that point. Though episodes of Ticky Taffy Town can no longer be accessed by the public or by anyone outside of specific Foundation-approved testing, there are descriptions of the show's 5 main characters, or entities, included in the official file. They range from standard children's entertainment fare to imagery that is deeply disturbing. First, there is the fatherly, patient Mr. Squibbles, a bipedal humanoid with the head of a plush octopus and a wardrobe consisting of khaki trousers and a red sweater vest. He is responsible for imparting each episode's lesson. Next, there is Mrs. Bobble, a stereotypical clown with blue hair, white makeup, a red nose, and oversized, multicolored clothing. She acts as the questioner of the episode's theme or lesson, raising these questions with Mr. Squibbles. The source of mischief in Ticky Taffy Town is Kizzywink, a small entity resembling a bipedal feline with humanoid hands and an oversized head. Though the entity is mischievous, it is also benign and largely childlike in its behavior. Kizzywink has a companion named Franzipans, a small, round, plushy avian with a hammer in place of its beak. Acting as an annoying sidekick to Kizzywink, the entity will fly around the screen and hit the other entities with its hammer beak as a form of slapstick comedy. And then there is the infamous Mr. Hister. This entity is not depicted as overtly hostile, but its appearance is the most troubling in the show. This humanoid entity stands approximately 2.3 meters tall and wears a long, golden-yellow robe with a hood. The entity propels itself through the world with tentacles that emerge from beneath its cloak. Any attempts to produce an official description of the entity's face have proven difficult, due to the notable video distortion effect caused when the entity enters the frame. The closest current description of its face describes it as resembling a misshapen, tumorous human skull. A standard Mr. Hister episode of SCP-5853-A begins like most children's shows, with vivid colors, pleasant lighting, and cheerful music, as the main cast teaches standard lessons such as how to tie your shoes, why it's important to brush your teeth, and the value of honesty. When Mr. Hister enters the frame, however, everything changes. The video quality dulls, the colors become oversaturated to the point of becoming almost nausea-inducing, and the contrast decreases dramatically. The visuals aren't the only thing that change in Mr. Hister's presence. The subject matter also shifts in tone, as Mr. Hister torments the rest of the characters with nihilistic and distressing lessons such as, "Your parents will soon die, and so will you, and I feel nothing but the nothingness," or the particularly evocative, "You may not believe in the slaughter, but the slaughter believes in you." When Mr. Hister leaves the scene, he always recites this phrase, "I shall now be departing to the land of right, with the truth of red to be my might." This phrase is thought to be related to the various child disappearances attributed to the show. On January 4, 2000, lead researcher Frank Monroe conducted the first test involving SCP-5853-A. Accompanied by junior researchers Tracy Klaus and Morgan Eskew, and supervised by Ethics Committee consultant Jennifer Lamb, Monroe began the test with D-Class 643980 restrained to a detainment chair in the middle of an observation room, placed in front of a television set. D-643980 was also hooked up to standard medical equipment to measure his vitals, while the junior researchers scanned infrared, ultraviolet, and other frequency wavelengths of the television program for any anomalous activity. With this setup in place, lead researcher Monroe signaled for the test to begin. The television was switched on and began to play Ticky Taffy Town Season 1, Episode 3, the first on-screen appearance of Mr. Hister. As the episode began, everything proceeded normally, aside from a small increase in Hume levels. As it progressed, however, the D-Class became increasingly agitated, his heart rate and perspiration increasing. He demanded to know why the show was chosen, explaining that he had childhood memories of the program. His younger brother used to watch the show all the time, until he disappeared. Upon hearing this, Ethics Committee consultant Jennifer Lamb became visibly distressed, but advised the research team to proceed with the test in spite of this unforeseen emotional component. After the episode finished, D-643980 was freed from his torso restraints and given a microphone, earpiece, receiver, and shoulder camera mount. He was then given a package of SCP-5853, at which point he remarked that he ate them as a child, but only ever ate the raspberry flavor, while his brother preferred the cherry. He was instructed to eat the cherry piece, then recite the phrase, "Flesh is not the truth." At this point, the theme song of Ticky Taffy Town filled the room, and the D-Class vanished from sight, disappearing from the observation room altogether. Dr. Monroe was able to maintain communication with D-643980 via the microphone and receiver, and the research team monitored his video feed. The D-Class began in a dark place, with one single stream of light splitting the center field of view. After some resistance, he continued into the unknown, stumbling out of Mr. Squibble's treasure chest. Upon exiting the chest, the larger landscape could be seen, an exact replica of the Ticky Taffy Town set, with a blank white backdrop covering any areas not usually seen by the audience. As the members of the main cast, with the exception of Mr. Hister, entered the area, the D-Class hid in the chest. The four chattered excitedly about an upcoming town meeting before Mr. Squibbles opened the chest and discovered the D-Class hiding inside. He was instructed to engage with the entities until the Foundation could come up with an appropriate extraction plan. The D-Class became distressed and swore, prompting Mrs. Bobble to turn a glowing red until Mr. Squibbles calmed her down. Kizzy Wink asked the D-Class his name, and he answered that it was Davy. At this point, the entities instructed Davy to follow them to the town meeting, where he would be their esteemed guest. Together, they left the house, entering an area made up of the miniature town from the show's opening sequence, only grown to full scale. In the background was the same vacant white backdrop, as well as seemingly infinite copies of the same town landscape. Davy and the group followed a long road toward a cobblestone town square. As the research team watched the video feed, they could see that other pathways in the background were occupied by their own versions of the main cast of characters, all walking toward the same central location. These groups were accompanied, much to the horror of the research team, by small children. Each of the houses along the path was printed with a number corresponding to an episode of Ticky Taffy Town that featured Mr. Hister. According to the research team's calculations, this amounted to 31 episodes of the show that were actively able to steal children. Dr. Monroe suggested sending in a mobile task force, but Jennifer Lamb refused to sign off on the request, concerned about the unknown nature of the location and the potential ramifications of sending MTF members inside. While the research team was debating about the next steps, Davy and his new friends reached the town square. There were over 100 entities and 200 children gathered together there. Some children were weeping, others stood silently, eyes ringed with dark circles from lack of sleep. Every single one of them looked utterly terrified. The entities began to chant together, "I now arrive to the sea of sin, with the red of my flesh to offer him." A mirror-like rectangle appeared above the town square's fountain, spinning until it blurred into a black void. Then, Mr. Hister emerged from the darkness. Mr. Hister addressed the crowd, calling out, "My children, it is time to tell Mr. Hister what lesson you learned today." He selected a young girl from the crowd and asked her to recite the lesson she learned. She answered, repeating a lesson from Mr. Squibbles concerning the importance of tying one's shoes. Mr. Hister replied, "Your prize is to pass through the mirror and into the dreamlands." He lifted the girl into the air and tossed her into the mirror behind him. She screamed and disappeared. He proceeded to call up child after child, asking them to repeat the lesson that they learned. When they answered, they were tossed into the mirror. If the child couldn't remember their lesson, however, well, the less that is said about that, the better. Before long, the fountain was filled with deep red water, which the other Ticky Taffy Town entities greedily slurped up. Eventually, Mr. Hister turned to Dave, asking him what lesson he learned. Dave struggled to answer, guessing a phrase that Mr. Squibbles said, "Don't make Mrs. Bobble upset, lest you fail his hideous test." This was the wrong answer. Mr. Hister lifted Dave into the sky, where he was suspended upside down alongside other humanoid figures, one of whom he recognized as his long-lost younger brother, Jeremy. At this point, Dave stopped responding to Dr. Monroe and his research team. The camera feed remained active for 3 days, suspended upside down next to Dave's body. On screen, a continuous stream of red liquid, presumed to be blood, could be seen flowing over the lens. The feed was cut short, and Dave was presumed lost. As harrowing as it was, this initial test provided the SCP Foundation with some vital information on the inner workings of SCP-5853-A. They were able to determine that, depending on the answer a stolen victim gives, they will be able to affect their own fate. If the victim answers Mr. Hister's question, "What did you learn today?" with the intended lesson imparted in the episode, they will be passed through the mirror. What awaits them beyond it, no one but Mr. Hister knows, but it is unlikely to be anything good. If the victim answers with a lesson they learned while inside of the extra-dimensional space, they will be left to hang upside down with Dave and the rest of those suspended in the air. If they don't remember or lie about forgetting their lesson, they will be consumed by the entities. But there is one way out. If the victim answers by repeating or summarizing Mr. Hister's darker lesson from the episode, the victim will be released from the extra-dimensional space and transported back to the place they vanished from. For example, UIU Agent Mathis's son, Thomas, reappeared in the kitchen pantry of his home on January 8, 2000, after he did just that. Following the D-Class exploration of Ticky Taffy Town, Dr. Monroe reached out to Jennifer Lamb, requesting that she reconsider her decision to decline MTF operations in the area. She refused to change her mind, telling him to scan media spaces, recall the candy, and call it a day. With the Ethics Committee refusing to approve MTF action, Dr. Monroe instead reached out to his friend, Terrence Bazarian, who occupied an MTF Alpha position. He managed, via appealing to Terrence's role as a parent, to convince him to agree to an off-books, 3-man mission into the spatial anomaly of SCP-5853-A. The small, unofficial mobile task force began its operation on January 20th, 2000. Frank Monroe served as commanding officer. Terrence Bazarian acted as team lead, Alpha, Robert Falk as right flank, Charlie, and Mohammed Al-Abi as left flank, Delta. Each member of the team was instructed to consume a piece of cherry-flavored Ticky Taffy and recite the phrase, "You may not believe in the slaughter, but the slaughter believes in you." Soon after, all 3 men were transported into the world of SCP-5853-A. They climbed out of the toy chest to find the cartoonish kitchen, the busily decorated living room, and the door to the outside area. The MTF team got to work investigating the area immediately, making note of the fact that all of the items in the house were fake, simply props for a children's show. The door to the set began to open, and the 3 MTF members hid out of sight. Monroe warned them to not under any circumstances engage with the entities in any way. The cast, with the exception of Mr. Hister, entered the room and began checking the area for signs of new children transported to the world. Alpha was discovered first and opened fire on Mr. Squibbles, who stumbled backward, leaking brown fluid until it collapsed. The remaining entities began to scream as the area dimmed to black. Suddenly, everything was dark and silent. The MTF feed switched to night vision as Delta, Charlie, and Alpha began to explore the area. Monroe ordered them to get to the town center as fast as possible and tell Mr. Hister the key phrase so that they could be transported back to the SCP Foundation site. As he delivered the instructions, his audio feed began to degrade until the MTF officers could no longer hear him. Left alone in Ticky Taffy Town, they had to proceed on their own. As the officers resumed motion, Franzipans flew at Charlie's head at top speed, its hammer beak colliding with the man's head and sending him careening into a nearby wall. The impact was fatal, and Agent Charlie collapsed to the ground, dead. Agents Alpha and Delta continued firing on Franzipans, and Alpha ordered Delta to head toward the door and make his way out. When he reached the door, however, Mr. Squibbles was waiting on the other side. It grabbed Agent Delta as an instance of Kizzywink used its claws to kill him. In a heroic dying act, Agent Delta pulled a pin from one of his incendiary grenades and charged at Mr. Squiggles, blowing them both up. Agent Alpha was the only one left standing, alone with Mrs. Bobble the clown. She charged at Alpha as he fired a grenade round that subdued her. Taking his moment, Alpha escaped the building, navigating his way through the pitch-black landscape. Alpha used his night vision view to navigate a narrow path toward a single light in the distance. He walked for approximately 182 minutes, at which point he remarked on the sensation of the path deepening, lengthening, and pulling him down. He began to approach the town square before everything faded to static. When Alpha's video feed returned, he was standing in front of a white wooden door. He reached out to open it and spotted a woman that appeared to be Jessie Bazarian, his wife, sitting in a rocking chair and humming a lullaby to the infant in her arms. He attempted to speak to her, but she addressed him in the manner of Mr. Hister, saying, "See the mirror, through the mirror. The mirror is the only salvation. Salvation achieved by sacrifice to he who is divine among the dreamlands. Release yourself through the mirror. Ascend through the mirror. Transcend through the mirror." Alpha screamed, collapsing to the ground. When he regained consciousness, he was face to face with Mr. Hister himself. The entity smugly asked, "Terrence, what did you learn today?" Rather than reciting the key phrase and attempting to return home, Alpha pulled the pin from his remaining grenade and let it fall to the ground. The video feed cut out, and the entire mobile task force that entered Ticky Taffy Town that day was presumed dead. 2 days later, Dr. Frank Monroe sent out the following email. "To whom it may concern and C. Miles, I regret to inform you that I am no longer able to fulfill my duties as researcher. I have come to the realization that Lamb was right, although I don't agree with her. I can't keep trying to save the world from the things we study. It's not about how far I can probe. It's for our own protection. I need to know when to call it quits. I could spend X number of dollars and X number of lives sacrificing to whatever to wherever I think, or wherever I think the mirror may bring us, who Mr. Hister might be, or the implications of a clown entity called Bobble. I could try to chase these down to their penultimate conclusion, sacrificing MTF, D-Class, and innocence alike. Lamb, she was right. God, I'm sorry, Terrence. All SCP-5853 needs is to be hidden, in the dark. I'm sorry, I'm just not made for this. Not anymore. I can no longer do this. Let me forget. Let me go back. Consider this my resignation. Respectfully, Dr. Frank Monroe." After a review by the O5 Council, Dr. Monroe's resignation request was denied. All SCP-5853 products have been publicly recalled. Any instances of SCP-5853 are to be kept in a standard containment unit in Secure Facility 64, Wing F. If any instances of SCP-5853 are discovered being sold, the sale must be intercepted immediately. Every episode of SCP-5853-A has been removed from the air, and television broadcasts and online video sites must be scanned regularly in order to prevent further spread of the materials. No Foundation personnel, including D-Class, that have or are considered having children may be assigned to SCP-5853. The SCP Foundation has attempted to uncover the identities of production staff and actors from the show, but so far, the investigation has turned up nothing but dead leads. A close analysis of the show's credits showed that, rather than a list of staff that worked on the episode, they consist of a constantly growing list of names. These names include those of children reported missing, as well as individuals yet to be identified. On January 23, 2000, the names Robert Falk, Mohammed Al-Abi, Terrence Bazarian, and Frank Monroe were added. Frank Monroe was pronounced missing in action, and to this day, has never been found.
The year is 1949. The place, the City of Angels, also known as Los Angeles. Some say that New York is the city that never sleeps. Well, this town gives that Big Apple a run for its money. The people here sleep, sure, but they all do it with one eye open. You never know who might stab you in the back and use you to climb up the next rung to fame and fortune. Because that's what everybody's chasing out here, following the glitter of Hollywood stardom from whatever small town they manage to crawl out of. But some unlucky so-and-sos find out once they arrive that all that glitters is not necessarily gold. No one knows that hard truth better than one of LA's best private detectives. You probably haven't heard of him, unless you've ever found yourself in a real tight spot. No one ever steps into the detective's office when they're having a good day. No, it's folks who hit rock bottom and found something lower, who know their way around the underbelly where the Angel City's demons like to hide. On this particular day, an unusually rainy day for a city with so much sun, one of these poor, unfortunate souls knocks on the detective's door. He's sitting at his desk, drinking a cup of strong black coffee and watching the rain, when the knock shakes him back to earth. The door opens a crack, and a beautiful blonde in a gray coat enters. She heard a rumor that if the cops can't help you solve a case, he's the guy to see. He shrugs, taking a sip of coffee. Maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. Depends on the case, of course, and depends if she can afford his fee. She laughs at this, tossing him an envelope stuffed to the brim with cold, hard cash. Money, she assures him, is no object. The detective counts the money, inspects it to make sure it's the real deal. It is. He slides the envelope into a drawer in his desk, then folds his hands, leaning forward to give the mystery woman his full attention. What brings her into the office today? She slaps down another envelope onto the desk. This one's larger, and when he opens it, a few photographs tumble out. He's seen a whole lot of ugliness in his time, but he's never laid eyes on anything quite like this. They're crime scene photographs. Some poor sucker killed in his bed. That's not so unusual. It's the method of murder that strikes the detective as odd. The guy looks like a pincushion, absolutely covered with arrows. Why break into a man's home to attack him with arrows? Seems a bit old-fashioned when a revolver isn't exactly hard to come by in this town. The strangeness doesn't stop there either. The second photograph gives a closer look at the bed itself. The arrows came through the bottom of the bed. As far as the detective can tell, the poor sap tucked himself into bed and went off to dreamland, all the while unaware that his killer was hiding under the bed with some sort of bow and arrow. Then the killer somehow managed to fire 11 arrows without his victim catching wise. He can see why the woman brought this to him. No doubt the cops did what they could to sweep it under the rug. Something this strange, they'd want to keep it out of the papers at any cost. Keep people from panicking about mysterious archers stalking the streets. So, who is this guy? The stiff. The woman dabs at her eyes with a handkerchief. He was a dear friend of hers, she explains. All she wants is to uncover the truth of what happened to him and track down the sick creep who did the deed.
She already paid the fee up front. There's only one matter left to discuss. Will the detective take the case? He glances back down at the photographs, the bed, the arrows, the victim. He's in this line of work for the money, of course, and the flexible hours aren't bad either. But what he really loves more than anything is solving a mystery. And this is one of the juiciest mysteries he's seen. He agrees to take the case, and they seal the deal with a handshake. As the woman prepares to leave his office, she turns back one more time. There's just one more thing the detective should know about the victim. He was a big-shot producer, the guy behind one of the biggest animation studios in town. If the detective can solve this, there's likely to be a big bonus in store for him, not to mention the boost to his reputation that would come with cracking such a high-profile case. He'd better not screw this up. First things first, he'd better check out the crime scene. The detective is a pretty smooth talker, and he uses that silver tongue to talk his way into the victim's home, passing himself off as an old friend of the deceased. Once inside, it's time to do a little poking around and see what he can find. Nothing too out of the ordinary for the most part, the standard rich guy stuff. Fancy vases, awards on the shelves, posters for movies the fellow must have financed. He makes his way to the bedroom, hoping to find a bit more information at the scene of the crime itself. There's the mattress, stained with blood and riddled with holes from the arrows. He crouches down and inspects the floor. Sure enough, no marks on the floor. The arrows didn't come from below, with the killer in the basement or under the floorboards. They had to have hidden under the bed. But now that he's looking at the bed up close, the detective notices a significant issue with that particular theory. There's not enough room under here, unless the killer was a kid or had the world's smallest bow. There's no way they could have pulled the whole thing off. There's just not enough space. So how'd they manage it? He stands up, scratching his head. It just doesn't make any sense. This case is going to be trickier than he thought. Wait, what's that? He spots a piece of paper tucked onto a nearby shelf. It's crumpled up and speckled with blood. Wait a minute. Something comes back to him. In the picture, there was an arrow through the victim's tongue. It had something tied to it, a scrap of paper. A note. He snatches up the paper and unfolds it for a better look. This has got to be the same note. Now, what does it say? As he reads the words, they leave him with even more questions and not a single real answer. Chronicles 1:10, I am no Fudd. Who's Fudd? And what's this Chronicles business? Gotta be a Bible verse, he realizes. The detective isn't too familiar with the Bible, so he can't place the verse off the top of his head. But he has a Bible back at home, one that came with the apartment, left behind by the previous tenant when they left in a hurry. He pockets the note and heads on home to follow the only lead he's got. When he gets home, he pours himself a drink, slumps into his favorite armchair, and cracks open that unused Bible. Chronicles 1:10. He flips to the verse mentioned in the note and reads, Cush fathered Nimrod, who was first to become a great warrior on earth. That's it? Some guy named Cush fathering a warrior named Nimrod? What does that have to do with anything? Maybe the killer is just out of his mind. The detective rereads the passage again and again, searching for some hidden meaning, until he falls asleep in his chair. He wakes the next morning to the sound of banging on his door. He blearily wipes the sleep from his eyes and stumbles over, opening it to find his client, that same beautiful but aloof blonde standing there. She's much less put together than she was yesterday. Her hair is askew, her eyes wide and wild. There's been another murder, she tells him. Someone else found dead in their home, body full of arrows. No time to make a pot of coffee then. He grabs his coat and follows the woman to the next crime scene. This time the body's still there, and he can see it for himself. The man is sitting on the floor, back against the door to his room, as if he was trying to hold it shut. The arrows went right through the wood and into his back. 6 of them, all sharp enough to pierce the wood and the victim's vital organs. Who was this guy? The blonde explains. He was another friend of hers. He had worked as an animator at the first victim's studio. The detective pulls a little notebook from his pocket jotting that down. That, right there, is a lead. Is there anyone at the studio that she can think of who might want to harm these men? The woman shakes her head. She can't think of anyone. Still, this doesn't seem like a coincidence. The detective knows where his next stop is going to be: the animation studio. After a thorough examination of the new crime scene and not a single new clue to show for it, the detective hoofs it over to the animation studio. At first, the security guards won't let him inside, but that silver tongue of his manages to get him in the door once again. Now what? He can't ask to speak to whoever's in charge. He's already pushing up daisies. Instead, he'll just have to take a walk through the halls and follow his instincts. As he walks, he suddenly hears a name coming from a nearby room.
Poor little Nimrod.
Did that voice just say? There's no mistaking it. He definitely heard Nimrod. He pushes the door open and finds a small screening room with a cartoon playing on a projector. The cartoon depicts a rabbit taunting a hunter. The men inside ask the detective what he's doing there, but he has a question for them first. What is this cartoon? Why, it's a wild hare, they tell him, introducing Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd. The detective jots down another note, that Bible verse on the first victim's body, this bunny cartoon. They all have to be connected somehow. He thanks the gentlemen for their time and excuses himself. The detective spends the night in his office, trying desperately to make the pieces fit together. Theories whirl around inside his head, but none of them seem quite right. Maybe someone on the production team has a grudge against his colleagues. Maybe someone was fired from the project and is taking some kind of revenge. Or maybe it's something else altogether, an affair gone wrong. It's usually an affair these days. But then why reference the cartoon? Why Nimrod? Why arrows? Why any of it? The detective rests his head in his hands, letting out a heavy sigh. The more he learns about this case, the less sense it makes. He has no way of knowing when or if the killer is going to strike again. The next morning, he wakes up to a phone call. His stomach drops, and he almost doesn't pick up. But he already knows what he's going to hear. There's been another murder. Another poor sap full of arrows. This time, it's a writer, one of the guys responsible for the script on A Wild Hare. Somebody in this town has a problem with the team behind that cartoon. They're picking each guy off, one by one. If he didn't know better, he'd say it seemed like Elmer Fudd might be a real guy with a grudge. But that's crazy. LA is a crazy town a lot of the time. But come on, it's not completely Looney Tunes. At the crime scene, there are more impossible arrows. These came up through the floor, skewering the victim while he watched TV on the couch. Here's the thing, though. The guy's house has no basement. So how the hell did the arrows come through the floor? It's impossible. It should be impossible, at least. But it happened. In one desperate moment of frustration, the detective tears up the floorboards with his bare hands, half expecting to find some sort of secret compartment under there. There's nothing but a cement foundation. As he runs his hands over the cement, he finds holes there, too. The arrows pierce the floor from deep down in the earth. That afternoon, the detective does something he's never done before. He gives the client a refund. He hands the envelope of cash back to the blonde with an apology. She blows her nose into her handkerchief and gives him a goodbye kiss on the cheek. Some questions, it seems, were never meant to be answered. Even the greatest private detective in the city has his limits. He heads to a local watering hole that night to drown his sorrows and gets a bit chatty with the bartender. He tells him about the case with no answers, the mysterious archer picking off animators around town and defying the laws of nature. Suddenly, someone taps him on the shoulder. He looks up and sees a man in a dark suit with a friendly, bespectacled face. The man offers to buy his next round in exchange for a conversation. He wants to hear everything the detective knows about the case. The detective is unsure at first. Who's asking? He raises an eyebrow. The strange man slides a drink toward him with a smile.
You ever heard of a little place called the SCP Foundation?
The two men chatted into the night about the mystery that, as it turns out, had a name. The stranger called it SCP-3940.
SCP-3940 refers not to one entity, but to a series of 56 murders that occurred between 1949 and 1989. In each case, the murder victims were struck with one or more arrows fired from an unseen source. All targets of the SCP-3940 murders died of physical trauma, no matter how quickly they received medical treatment or how competent that medical treatment was. The time from the initial injury to the loss of consciousness was approximately 5 minutes in each case. All individuals targeted by SCP-3940 fit a shared profile. They were all employed by Leon Schlesinger Productions, later renamed Warner Brothers, between the years 1938 and 1944. Additionally, the majority of the victims were involved in the production of the 1940 cartoon short, A Wild Hare, better known as the first cartoon to introduce the characters of Bugs Bunny and the hapless hunter Elmer Fudd. At first, the murders were not considered to be anomalous, but as the killing spree progressed, the Foundation determined that many of the victims had been shot from angles that were confirmed to be physically impossible. Sometimes they were caught on camera, other times the arrows reached the target in spite of physical barriers blocking their way. One particularly notable example is the fate of Phil Monroe, one of the original animators of the Looney Tunes series of cartoons. In 1988, the Foundation became concerned that Phil would be the next target and brought him to Foundation Site-19 for his own safety. He was placed in a secure cell under the guise of protective detail organized by the FBI. Though he should have been perfectly safe inside, enclosed as he was in bulletproof walls made to withstand even an attack from SCP-682, Phil was found dead in his cell the very same day he was placed into protective custody. When Foundation staff arrived to deliver his dinner, they found Phil lying on the floor face down, limp body riddled with arrows. Upon reviewing the security footage, the security team was stumped. The video showed Phil sitting in his cell, idly flipping through a magazine that had been provided for his entertainment. Suddenly, he looked up, eyes wide as if he had heard a strange noise. Then, all at once, an arrow erupted through the wall, piercing him through the chest. He slumped to the floor, remaining there until his body was discovered. It was later confirmed that several Foundation researchers had identified the arrow aimed at Phil prior to it being fired, observing it at a location over 3 miles away from Site-19. But when the arrow was launched, it managed to travel 3 miles, pierce through the ground, and make its way through multiple layers of Foundation security walls before reaching its intended target. This was the incident that caused the Foundation to abandon any attempts to protect SCP-3940's victims. If the arrows could travel such long distances and pierce supposedly unpierceable walls, then it seemed to be a futile endeavor. The Foundation first discovered SCP-3940 in 1949, when Leon Schlesinger was found dead in his home. He was still lying in his bed, pinned there by 11 arrows that had shot through the bottom of the bed, up through the mattress, and into his body. Curiously, the floor beneath the bed was completely undamaged. One of the arrows was lodged in Schlesinger's tongue and had the note referencing Chronicles 110 attached. Originally, the Foundation suspected that the anomaly was an isolated incident, a series of attacks being committed by one person of interest, but it quickly became apparent after 3 near-identical cases in a row that this was something much more anomalous. On July 10, 1989, Mel Blanc, the prolific voice actor perhaps best known for playing the character of Bugs Bunny beginning in 1940, was killed by a total of 59 arrows. Don't look that up, you won't find any further details. I'm told there was an elaborate cover-up involving the press and the Blanc estate, but trust me when I say, I have done my due diligence and confirmed the story via some, shall we say, alternative sources who wish to remain anonymous. The arrow bisecting Blanc's famous cheeks had a note attached, reading, "In Assyria, we punished slander with death." Meanwhile, at the exact moment of Blanc's death, the statue of Bugs Bunny outside of Warner Brothers Studios was pelted with a barrage of approximately 4,000 arrows, pummeling it from every direction, including underground, which should have been impossible, until it was reduced to rubble. When the dust had settled, a secondary barrage of 372 arrows was fired at the ground in front of the statue's remains. When viewed from above, the arrows spelled out a message. "That's what's up, Doc." Following the death of Mel Blanc and the assault on the Bugs Bunny statue, 2 simultaneous events designated Incident 3940-1, there has been no further SCP-3940 activity detected. Containment measures previously in place included disinformation protocols regarding the victims and their deaths, and guidelines for tracking the killer. Initially, the Foundation attempted to intervene and protect predicted victims, but after these efforts failed 14 times in a row, they were suspended. Because SCP-3940 has been inactive for decades, its designation has been changed to neutralized. It appears that Nimrod got the revenge he craved. It seems to me that something took offense to Bugs Bunny's snide invocation of Nimrod in the Wild Hare cartoon. Nimrod, for those unaware, is a biblical figure known for being a mighty hunter. Perhaps, and this is just an educated guess, he would hunt with arrows. Far be it from me to suggest that a figure from the Bible went on a quest for vengeance against Warner Brothers and the creators of Bugs Bunny, but stranger things have certainly happened before. I can't be entirely certain if Nimrod himself carried out these anomalous killings, but it seems that someone very powerful took it upon themselves to dole out some truly Old Testament-style justice. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a wound for a wound. When the grudge was settled, then the killings stopped. Whatever may have triggered the event, I'll certainly be careful which names I throw around as an insult in the future. You just never know who's listening and what they might do about it.
The ground shakes. A deep rumble tears through the ruins, sending them to crumble to the streets below. From behind boarded windows and barricaded doors, the residents cower in terror. One thought grips them all. Is it another quake? Or another swarm arriving? There's barely a second's pause between the thunderous impacts, each one more intense than the last. It's as though something ominous is marching closer, one deafening step at a time. Some of the locals rush to grab weapons, preparing to defend their hometown. Others just pull their families close and pray that it's all over quickly. And it will be. The Duke and his army are the first to take to the streets, piling out of the back of the ice cream truck spray-painted with their insignia. Guns in their hands, they fan out, sweeping the vacant streets for the source of the disturbance. They climb over abandoned cars for a better vantage point, scour the distance, only for the ground to shudder again. They're getting stronger. The Duke can feel it. Everyone around him glances his way, quick, worried eyes darting over, looking for an explanation, guidance, orders, something. But before the Duke can offer his ragtag militia some kind of reassurance, something moves nearby. Everyone freezes, head snapping toward the skitter of insectoid limbs on concrete. Green laser beams converge on an empty patch of pavement beside the parked cars. In an instant, the sound has gone, quickly replaced by another earth-shaking impact. The few windows that are still intact shatter. Cars are jostled up into the air, their suspensions shrieking. Alarms start wailing in an endless loop that sets the advancing army on edge. Another scurried, scratching movement, this time from behind the row of cars by the sidewalk. It's impossible to tell if they'd been parked when everything started to go wrong, or if their drivers had abandoned their vehicles in a state of blind panic. All those vehicles are now just cover, a hiding place for whatever is lying in wait. The Duke gives a nod to one of his soldiers, wordlessly directing to move forward. Leaping into action, the man clambers atop the hood of one of the cars, only for the creature to hurriedly scamper out of its hiding place and climb onto him. Another quake shudders through the street. The soldier loses his footing, toppling from the car as gnashing mandibles snap inches from his face. He strains, barely holding them back. The thing looks wrong. Segmented legs and spines on its back, grooves running down its dark brownish head and thorax, and up close, it's even worse. The soldier tries desperately to fight it off. It's the size of a large dog, antennae flicking wildly through the air as it tries to determine which part of the man's body would be the best to bite. All around, the other soldiers raise their guns, their laser sights frantically sweeping through the air. Their flashlight beams blind their squad mate on the ground, causing him and the enormous bug to keep flailing. Everybody is yelling. Nobody can get a clean shot without also shooting the horrified soldier. A sudden, deafening gunshot rings out, silencing the panicked shouting. The heavy caliber bullet from the Duke's revolver bursts the insect's head apart like a water balloon, leaving little more than a redundant recess at the front of its body. Pushing the corpse away, the soldier scrambles to his feet, shaken, but otherwise miraculously unharmed. He turns to see the Duke, calmly spinning the gun around in his fingers. The Duke's cold eyes say it all. He didn't care if his man died. only that the bug was destroyed. Another quake, this one closer than ever, the sheer force of it powerful enough to cause all the militia soldiers to stagger. They quickly realize they aren't the only ones who have been disrupted by the encroaching earthquakes. From nearby, another of the enormous insects appears, swiftly followed by another, a scant few now closing in on their human enemies, most of them roughly the size of wolves. They clamber over vehicles, emerging from around street corners, as the militia raises their guns once again, waiting for the word. They don't get one. Instead, the Duke once again draws his revolver and fires, the round turning one of the bugs into little more than a collection of dismembered legs. Taking that as their command, the group opens fire, bullets now spraying in all directions. At the noise, the insects scatter, their movements becoming faster and more erratic as they try to advance on the soldiers' position. Most don't make it closer than a few feet before being caught in the path of the automatic gunfire, bursting into ruined remnants of exoskeletons. But the more that the soldiers kill, the more that appear in their wake. A huge torrent of bugs sweeps the street, pouring out of every crevice and charging over the fallen bodies of the other members of their colony. The survivors' guns start to give empty, hollow clicks as their ammunition runs dry. One of the soldiers nearest to the oncoming swarm is pounced on by several enormous insects, then vanishes from view. His piercing screams are the only sign he remains before the swarm engulfs him completely. Firing the last round in his revolver, the Duke turns and runs, leaving the rest of his men to the incoming mass of bugs. He forces himself to block out their blood-curdling screams as they're eviscerated, chunks of their flesh caught between mandibles and pulled away, or apart, by the creatures. Their bite strength is powerful enough to tear steel. The swarm has no problem cleaving through human muscle and bone. As his soldiers are overrun, the Duke dashes down a nearby alleyway, hoping to cut between the two derelict buildings and find a viable escape route to the next street. But he's met by a dead end. Behind him, he hears the chittering of mandibles and the gentle creep of insect legs. He turns, his revolver raised, and squeezes the trigger at the lone bug. The weapon gives a redundant click, and the Duke is left defenseless, with nowhere to run. He casts his eyes to the heavens and waits for the inevitable. Then, he sees it. Another quake has brought something else with it. High above the buildings, a vast, shadowy object casts a silhouette against the sky. It's so huge it practically blocks out all daylight. It looms like a great gigantic vessel, slowly passing overhead. Except it's not passing at all. It's descending. Every second it's getting lower and lower. In mere moments, it's already made contact with the taller buildings in town, crushing them beneath its weight, bringing whatever is left of their top floors crumbling down to street level. The vast shadow drifts overhead. At first, it seems to descend for a landing, but with every passing second, its true scale emerges. From the ground, it looms colossal, drowning the entire district in darkness. Rubble starts raining down around the Duke, who resigns himself to his fate. He watches the ominous, gargantuan invader landing, until he can watch no longer. The morning of June 7th, 2002 was hardly a typical one for Lyle Putt. Then again, being a special agent at the SCP Foundation was hardly a typical job. Still, by the time he arrived at the facility he was assigned to, Putt was starting to regret leaving his pager off that particular morning. Walking from the parking lot over to the research personnel entrance, he'd been expecting to be put through the same usual routine: security checks and specialized scans, joining the line of everyone else as they were all checked for any potentially hazardous anomalous material or conditions. But this morning, there were no security checks. Instead, a member of site personnel grabbed the agent and pulled him forcefully into the building, hurriedly half-explaining that there was no time for protocols. They'd been trying to reach Putt all morning, and that he needed to get to a briefing room right away, because there was a situation in New Jersey. Inside was chaos. Researchers were dashing from room to room, some throwing whatever files they had been examining to the floor. Special Agent Putt tried to get some kind of answer about what was going on, but the security officer kept insisting they couldn't tell him. They hadn't been authorized to divulge that information, and that it would be easier if Putt just attended the emergency briefing, a briefing he was, apparently, late for. Reaching one of the site's meeting rooms, the officer urged the Foundation agent inside, murmuring a wish of good luck to him as Putt stumbled in.
Standing with their arms folded impatiently were a group of men and women sporting tactical gear. An insignia of a large, serpent-like being coiled around a tall building with a pointed spire was emblazoned on the patches on the shoulders of their uniforms. Mobile Task Force Pi 1, or more often referred to by their operational codename of the City Slickers. This situation really was serious, Lyle silently realized. MTF Pi 1 were the team the Foundation sent out to investigate, contain, or clean up any anomalies that appeared in densely populated urban environments. They were often deployed throughout the New York metropolitan area, and if something bad had gone down in Jersey, then it was no wonder the Slickers had been called in. Looking sternly at Agent Putt across the room, lead researcher Gus McGinley cleared his throat and noted that they could begin. Behind him, an image of a highway map was being projected onto the wall, focused on an area about 3 miles north from Morristown, New Jersey, and 30 miles west of New York City. It was a small intersection between Route 202 and Route 10, barely big enough for a small village, let alone a town. Yet, despite this, the area was labeled as Littleton, New Jersey. As McGinley began to explain, the image being projected on the wall changed, this time to a God's eye view photograph of the same intersection. Sure enough, there was the town, captured by satellite imagery, and according to McGinley, the photo had been taken less than 24 hours ago. The next image was from this morning. Putt and the members of Pi 1 squinted at the projection, trying to discern the difference between the two pictures. It was like the most high-stakes game of spot the difference ever conceived. It wasn't until lead researcher McGinley clicked along to an up-close view of the same image that the difference became impossible to miss. The whole area was empty. McGinley spelled out the situation plainly. At approximately 0300 hours Eastern Standard Time, the town of Littleton had spontaneously vanished. All attempts by the Foundation to contact residents of the area had failed. There was no sign of any of them anywhere. Satellites had run thermal scans of the area and had been unable to locate the missing residents or the infrastructure of the town. Most of the buildings in the area were older houses built in the late 18th or early 19th centuries, and those had all vanished too. Naturally, an entire town disappearing could be a potential public relations nightmare for the SCP Foundation, and this had been the source of all the morning's commotion. Researchers were being pulled away from other containment projects to help assist field agents with coordinating a cover-up in order to maintain the Foundation's secrecy and prevent the public from gaining any knowledge of the anomalies. A hard thing to do when a whole town suddenly vanishes from existence. So far, the Foundation's only measure was to intercept all calls to Littleton, diverting anyone who tried to reach relatives there with the cover story of maintenance on the local phone lines. Naturally, before Lyle had even finished his morning coffee, the Foundation had been working frantically to determine why the town of Littleton had disappeared. They were trying to determine the cause of the anomaly while simultaneously attempting to get out ahead of any potential PR fires that it might cause. But so far, the Foundation had found no evidence of dimensional anomalies to explain the town's disappearance. The fate of Littleton and all its residents remained unknown, though everyone feared the worst. As the Foundation prepared to deploy an investigative team led by Agent Putt, they remained unaware of the truth. The residents of Littleton were already in grave danger, and the worst was yet to come. Having awoken on the morning of June 7th, the town found itself surrounded at its borders by blades of grass that appeared to be hundreds, if not thousands, of feet tall. With no way to navigate safely through the dense foliage and no way to contact the outside world, the townsfolk turned to city leaders for help. However, there was an unforeseen issue. By pure happenstance, that was the day that the winning mayoral candidate for the town of Littleton was due to be announced. Given the unprecedented nature of the situation that they now found themselves in, it appeared that judicial processes would need to be halted. However, the candidates and voters in what had already been an intense, several-month-long mayoral race were unable to agree on a figurehead to take charge during such a crisis. This resulted in widespread disagreements about what to do, with many residents aligning with one of two potential leaders, the current sitting mayor of Littleton and her rival in the aforementioned race. Instead of settling the race, this candidate declared a premature victory and insisted that his opponent was using this current crisis to circumvent the electoral process. These two groups of opposing viewpoints quickly became two radical, militant, armed factions. The tension between these militias was only exacerbated when the town of Littleton started being attacked by what appeared to be gigantic insects of indeterminate origin.
It took 3 days for the SCP Foundation to dispatch an investigative unit to the scene. Lead researcher McGinley had assigned Foundation Agent Putt to coordinate the team tasked with surveying the surrounding area. Meanwhile, a detachment of Mobile Task Force Pi-1 was sent to provide tactical support. It was suspected by Lyle that his assignment to the front of the survey unit was partially a retaliatory measure for his late attendance to the briefing on the incident, though he could find no evidence to support this notion. On June 10th, the Foundation team and their MTF escort arrived on site, searching the area around the forgotten New Jersey town. The intersection of highways running through the middle of Littleton had seemingly vanished along with the town and its inhabitants, with 4 disconnected roads leading to a vacant space in the middle of them. Fortunately, the area had been sealed off to the public. Cordons and diversions had been set up to direct drivers away, all under the falsified cover story of highway maintenance. The team paced cautiously around the area, scanning around the shallow crater in the earth left by the town's absence. Scans carried out by Foundation surveyors confirmed the area was free of radiation or any traces of harmful materials, anomalous or otherwise. Agent Lyle had half been expecting, or hoping because it would have been simpler, to find Littleton hidden behind an invisible domed force field or stuck in some pocket dimension adjacent to reality. But as he clambered into the muddy crater, staring at little more than vacant dirt, it started to seem there really was no trace of the missing town, until he heard a loud crunch under his foot. SCP-6287 refers to the town of Littleton, New Jersey, which disappeared along with all of its residents. Despite the SCP Foundation's best efforts, the exact location of the town could not be ascertained. That is, until a Foundation investigation team that included Agent Lyle Putt was dispatched to the area. SCP-6287 was discovered when structural debris was recovered from Agent Putt's right boot, which was confirmed to match the buildings and flora of SCP-6287. It appears, through some anomalous means, the entire town had been reduced to an area of roughly 5 centimeters cubed, leading to it remaining undetected until Agent Putt's fateful misstep. The impact of Agent Putt's boot resulted in the deaths of approximately 600 of the town's 780 residents. All subsequent efforts made by the Foundation to communicate with and assist the miniaturized survivors were unsuccessful. Due to their reduced stature, complications arose that made saving the remaining inhabitants unfeasible. It has been speculated by Foundation researchers that whatever caused the town to reduce in size may also have triggered some form of time dilation, resulting in the residents of Littleton experiencing the flow of time at a reduced rate. While it took 3 days for them to be located, this could have lasted as long as a month from their perspective. Researchers speculated that such prolonged isolation may have destabilized the community. Cut off from the outside world, they may have descended into lawlessness and violence. With no food, water, or other vital supplies, survival alone could have driven them to turn on one another. Without a way to effectively communicate with survivors, exactly what occurred there after the shrinking is unknown. Some have suggested that nearby colonies of Tetramorium immigrants, also known as pavement ants, may have viewed the miniaturized humans as a potential threat or source of food. These ants normally establish their colonies under pavement and are highly adapted to live in urban and suburban habitats. They are also known to attempt to conquer new areas and will attack neighboring colonies, often resulting in the deaths of thousands of pavement ants on the sidewalks of cities and towns. If any colonies of pavement ants were present in Littleton, they would have vastly outnumbered the human residents, as well as appearing to be abnormally large. Following the incident, SCP-6287 is awaiting a reclassification from Euclid class to neutralized. Agent Putt has been issued with no disciplinary action as a result of his actions. He was placed on a 6-month period of paid leave. He also received a referral to an SCP Foundation anomalous trauma counselor for his role in inadvertently killing 600 people. The exact phenomena that caused the town of Littleton to shrink remains unknown at present.
SCP Foundation web crawlers have long maintained a covert presence on a number of smaller, obscure forum websites. The goal of embedding themselves online in this way has been to improve upon a principle practiced by federal agencies within the United States, to survey the activity of Internet users as a means of threat detection. In the Foundation's case, they use their presence on fringe forums to determine the existence of anomalies that are yet to be contained. This was how they found the Rewind Man. An unusual recording surfaced on an obscure forum dedicated to unexplainable illnesses. Amid thousands of unsettling posts, many filled with graphic, disturbing images, one thread stood out. It featured a single audio file, supposedly uploaded as evidence of the user's symptoms. At first, it seemed the audio had been reversed using audio editing software, but it hadn't. The rest of the post was indecipherable, mostly containing a jumble of letters that nobody could translate. Commenters and other users had flagged the thread for deletion, assuming it to be spam. But the existence of the anomalous audio file was enough to pique the interest of the Foundation, leading to a full-scale investigation. Following the SCP Foundation's recovery of the unusual recording, they traced the IP address it was uploaded from. The address was connected with the last known residence of a missing person, and a raid of the location was authorized. An anomalous hazmat team was dispatched to an apartment in Stockport, England, where a 41-year-old male lived alone. It was surmised that whatever anomalous illness had been responsible for the unusual recording had been contracted by this missing resident. The condition of the apartment itself was generally untidy, determined to have been left in a state of disarray thanks partly to the anomalous condition and partly due to his untimely departure from his home. It was quickly proposed by the Foundation hazmat team that, given the nature of this illness, the man had been systematically untidying his home on a daily basis. Various articles of clothing and other everyday household items were scattered around the premises. In body camera footage later reviewed by the Foundation, research staff have remarked that the apartment resembles that of a chronic hoarder. However, according to interviews with the specimen himself and those he was known to, he has never displayed any hoarding tendencies throughout his life. Footage showed the hazmat team moving through the cramped confines of the small apartment, going from the narrow hallway into an adjacent kitchen. Like the rest of the residence, it was barely big enough for one person to fit in. Two members of the hazmat team were tasked with recording their findings within the kitchen, and both were noted as remarking they were glad to have been outfitted with rebreathers, but even their standard issue filtration apparatus wasn't enough to block out the kitchen's rancid smell. Most of the cupboards had been left empty. Instead, the plates, knives, and forks were scattered across every available surface in the kitchen, almost all of them appearing to have a variety of freshly prepared meals on top. There were plates that looked as though they had been made up ready for dinner, lunch, and even bowls of cereal, yet each one was untouched. Some had been left in such pristine, uneaten condition for so long that mold had set in, the faint sense of rotting food threatening to creep under the hazmat team's masks and down their throats. Throughout the apartments, there was very little evidence to indicate exactly how the subject contracted an anomalous infection. Remaining members of the Foundation's hazmat unit were instructed to gather any forensic materials that they could. It was hoped that anomalous pathology experts could determine both the cause of the infection and, crucially, whether or not it was contagious. Luckily, among the subject's personal effects was a tattered notebook, which appeared to have been used to track the rate of his infection. The initial entries didn't convey anything out of the ordinary. It seemed that prior to contracting his condition, the infectee used the notebook as a personal journal. Flicking through its pages, the hazmat team began to notice the occasional misspelling of words littered throughout. The further they read, words and sometimes even entire sentences had been spelled in reverse. Then letters written backwards, devolving into series of almost unrecognizable shapes. The infection seemed to have reached a point of such severity that after several frantic entries, the notebook became filled with line after line of the same repeated sentence. It wouldn't be until later, when the book was submitted into Foundation evidence and examined by an anomalous linguistics expert, that the repeated phrase was deciphered. Spelled backwards, each letter written in reverse, the subject had been writing, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog," over and over again. This was quickly identified as a common English-language pangram, or a sentence containing every letter of the alphabet. While the phrase is commonly used to practice touch typing or testing out computer keyboards, it seemed that the infected subject had found a different application for it. Foundation psychoanalysts concurred that he was trying to will himself to write the sentence in a normal, decipherable way instead of in reverse. Yet, due to his infection, he was unable to. This notion was corroborated by further evidence the forensic team discovered within the apartment, in particular, a series of recordings saved on the memory card of a digital dictaphone. The subject seemed to have switched over to this method of chronicling his infection after filling the pages in the notebook. When the hazmat unit played the recordings from the device, they quickly determined that the audio had been reversed. However, there didn't seem to be a function on the dictaphone that allowed for this. When the MP3 files were examined by a Foundation-appointed sound technician, they could find no evidence that the recordings had been altered in any way. It appeared as if they had somehow been recorded in reverse. Playing the files backwards at one speed allowed Foundation researchers to hear the contents of each recording. These daily logs left by the infectee gave the Foundation significant insight into how living with his condition drove him to the verge of a complete psychological breakdown. In the reverse recordings, he can be heard frantically crying and questioning what is happening to him, showcasing an awareness of his unusual symptoms. Obtaining these audio recordings of his voice were the final piece of the puzzle when it came to locating the infected subject. Isolating various unique waveforms within the recordings of his voice, then reversing these again, the SCP Foundation was able to create several samples of the infectee. The Foundation's Public Surveillance Department was then tasked with monitoring waveforms of civilian voices picked up by any and all microphones. From cell phones and closed-circuit cameras, the Foundation monitored all recording devices. Some personnel assumed this would be an easy task. After all, they were looking for the one person on Earth who spoke backwards. But finding a waveform that matched those uncovered in the subject's recordings was akin to finding one specifically shaped grain of sand in a desert. Around a month after the hazmat team searched the apartment, the infected subject was located when a waveform matching his was detected in the background of a phone call. Triangulating the cell carrier signal, the call was determined to have been made by a civilian passing through Reddish Vale Country Park, a 400-acre park in Stockport. Dispatching a recovery team to the area, the SCP Foundation issued an advisory to the park's management, Stockport Metropolitan Borough Council. Posing as the UK Health Security Agency, the Foundation informed the borough as well as local police that an immediate quarantine needed to be placed around Reddish Vale Country Park. No civilian access was to be granted until the UK HSA had prepared a response to an infectious disease outbreak in the area. In actuality, though, this was the cover story that allowed Mobile Task Force Beta 7, codenamed the Maz Hatters, to enter the area and apprehend the infected subject. Beta 7 were specifically requisitioned for the task, given their specialty in acquiring and containing biologically, chemically, and radiologically hazardous anomalies. At the time, it was still unknown if the anomalous condition the subject had contracted was contagious or not. This meant the Foundation had to deploy a rapid containment before the infection potentially spread, becoming a full-scale pandemic. When they arrived, however, Beta 7 operators discovered a disheveled male sleeping rough under a bridge within the park. As the team approached, he backed away from them with his hands outstretched, repeating a single indecipherable word over and over again. At the same time, though it was faint to the point of being near unintelligible, Foundation audio engineers were able to isolate the subject's voice in the background of the phone call. It was the same word, or the same sound at least, being repeated over and over again. It was when they played the extracted clip in reverse that they realized he was asking for help. The word was being spoken backwards. The man was remanded into Foundation custody after a brief difficulty with getting him to walk in the right direction. He was then delivered safely to Bioresearch Area 12 and formally designated as SCP-202. Researchers studying him were quick to note the basic details of the subject, that he was male, 41, and of both Asian and British descent. His fingerprints and samples of his DNA were soon matched with a full legal name, that being Redacted. From there, the Foundation were able to build a more accurate timeline of his anomalous condition, using the name to find the man's corresponding social media pages. Though he seemed to only possess one profile on an older platform, and one that hadn't been updated in around 4 years, it seemed to the Foundation's psychoanalysis teams that whatever had triggered the unknown infection had the unforeseen side effect of making SCP-202 a recluse. There was no record of a place of employment either, suggesting his infection had prevented him from working as well. Testing immediately commenced, with direct observation of his symptoms revealing the defining trait of SCP-202. He performed all actions in reverse. While his aging appeared to progress normally, as was confirmed by a study of his senescent cells under a microscope, SCP-202 spoke, walked, and even ate in the opposite way to what is considered normal. It seemed that his backing away from the MTF operatives that retrieved him had actually been an attempt to approach them instead. When engaged in conversation, SCP-202 spoke in English that had been reversed, though even through the backward speech, his British accent could still be detected by the discerning ear. Researchers would quickly discover that the most effective way to communicate with SCP-202 was to record his speech and then play it back in reverse. Given that he performed all actions in reverse, the observational team likened watching him to winding back the tape of an old VHS. Some members of personnel gave SCP-202 the nickname of the Rewind Man. According to interviews held with SCP-202, he asserted that he had been living a completely normal existence in Stockport until 4 years prior to the Foundation discovering him. He had awoken one morning only to find that he could only take clothes out of his wardrobe instead of being able to hang them up and put them away. This quickly led to him discovering that every action he attempted to carry out, he could only perform in reverse. The gradual decline towards this condition, as observed in his journal and audio logs, seemed to refute this claim that the condition had occurred spontaneously one day. It was surmised that SCP-202 had been living with the condition for so long that, as far as he was concerned, this had all just started one day. It seemed that no matter how hard SCP-202 tried, he was unable to carry out normal patterns of motion. Within surveillance footage of him gathered and stored by the Foundation, he appeared to be able to walk backwards near perfectly, even while in crowded public areas, managing to never bump into anyone. When questioned about this, SCP-202 was unable to explain how he pulled off this or other similarly inexplicable acts. Several schools of thought quickly developed surrounding the precise nature of SCP-202's anomalous condition. Some researchers adopted the belief that this was a 1 in a million psychosomatic condition. Thanks to some external factor, possibly relating to stress or trauma, SCP-202 had suffered a rare form of psychotic break that had rerouted his neural pathways, causing him to move and speak backwards. It was likened to some of the behavioral effects seen in people who sustain moderate to severe traumatic brain injuries and begin to exhibit changes in their personality. In opposition to this, there were researchers still rightly concerned that SCP-202 was patient zero for some still unidentified anomalous infection. Their thinking stated that Redacted had been exposed to some pathogen during his day-to-day life, and this had one of two effects. One, it altered his brain chemistry, in much the way the other group of researchers believed. Or two, it had affected reality in such a way that it caused SCP-202 to perform tasks backwards. In order to determine exactly what was affecting him and how to treat it, if they even could, research teams were tasked with conducting further observations of SCP-202. This task was one that many found to be particularly frustrating. Foundation biologists and physicists were baffled by the functions of SCP-202's body, all of which were carried out in reverse to the way they should have occurred. For example, his heart, rather than acting as a pump that sent blood to the major organs around his body, did the opposite. The chambers of SCP-202's heart acted as vacuums, pulling his blood away from organs, and instead causing it to travel through his veins towards his arteries as opposed to away. Close analysis of his respiratory process revealed a similar anomaly, with SCP-202 exhaling oxygen and processing the carbon dioxide from the air. Researchers began trying to determine exactly how his respiratory system could possibly work on a molecular level, running in reverse to the usual Krebs cycle of metabolism. So far, they have still been unable to determine how this would work in a way that allowed SCP-202 to stay alive, leading some to join the theory that this anomalous condition is the result of some kind of reality warp rather than a biological infection or a psychological disorder. When he begged the Foundation, in reverse, for help, SCP-202 hadn't foreseen that he'd be subjected to an extended and highly invasive period of observation that included being watched while eating. The subject's revered bodily functions simultaneously repulsed and fascinated the more eccentric members of the research team, in particular exactly how SCP-202 ingested food, or rather, didn't. His eating habits were found to be particularly confounding to researchers, though through testing and close examination of his internal organs, they were able to ascertain exactly how SCP-202 ate. Food seemed to come up from his stomach, manifesting out of nowhere, then traveling along the length of his esophagus in the opposite direction to normal digestion. Upon his food reaching his throat and then entering his mouth, SCP-202 would perform a reverse chew that, instead of breaking the food down to be swallowed, would cause it to reform. Researchers witnessed this firsthand in a mix of horror and amusement as SCP-202 ate a sandwich by regurgitating boluses of food that his reverse chew turned into portions of a sandwich. These boluses from SCP-202 were combined into one mass until the entire sandwich had exited his mouth as a whole, untouched portion. The entire process appeared to defy all understood laws of physics and defied any conventional human biology. Even anomalous anatomy couldn't account for the spontaneous appearance of the pre-digested food boluses. SCP-202 himself claimed to have no clue what he was about to eat until it manifested in his stomach. The reverse digestion process appeared to be the explanation for the numerous, seemingly uneaten dishes of food left strewn around SCP-202's apartment to go moldy. Gathering the sandwich produced by SCP-202 and testing it extensively, Foundation researchers found that the resultant food created, or at least regurgitated, by SCP-202 is both completely normal and edible, safe for human consumption, provided they aren't put off by the knowledge of where that food came from. Naturally, and worryingly, a growing number of researchers became unnervingly fixated on other aspects of SCP-202's digestive system. In particular, what happened with regard to waste. Fascination with this particular bodily function of SCP-202 became so obsessive among some researchers that formal reprimands had to be issued, and affected personnel were restrained by the Foundation's Ethics Committee. Researchers were instructed to attend a mandatory 2-hour seminar on respecting the boundaries of anomalies, how to maintain a safe, sterile workplace. A direct order from the site commander was also issued, stating, "We're not having any more discussion about it. I think we can all paint a pretty picture of what goes on in there. The scientists can't explain where it comes from, and neither can the plumbers, so let's just leave it at that. The poor man has enough problems. Give him the courtesy of a little privacy. Until the quacks can come up with a reason to study it, I want all data on the topic expunged." In accordance with the order, any and all details regarding SCP-202's other reversed bodily functions have been redacted from his entry in the SCP database or deleted entirely. At present, there is no known cure for the condition SCP-202 is afflicted with. The SCP Foundation devoted considerable time and resources from its Center for Anomalous Disease Control in order to determine, categorically, that the infection exhibited by SCP-202 was non-contagious. Beyond that, however, and with the exception of the side effects and knowing precisely how the condition functions, the Foundation is still no closer to curing SCP-202. Research into the condition is still ongoing, though, and until such a time as it is able to be fully understood and treated, SCP-202 has been granted the full amenities of Level 0 personnel. This includes his own quarters, where he is permitted to reside between testing and examination. It has been noted that in his downtime, he appears to enjoy solving a Rubik's Cube, and seems to be rather good at it. His other hobbies include dismantling jigsaws, as opposed to putting them together. In order to maintain the Foundation's secrecy, SCP-202 has been allowed to live under the assumption that he is in hospital, being treated by doctors. He remains unaware these are actually SCP Foundation researchers. In contrast to what some members of personnel believe about him, the Rewind Man does not think in reverse. He is also unable to foresee the future. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-3052, Living Stick Figure.